Few people knew that there had been at least 2 prior plots to kill President Kennedy in 1963. One was in Chicago on November 2nd. The second was in Tampa on November 18th.
Kennedy ended up not going to Chicago. Tell us about that plot.
An informant on October 31st, an informant named Lee, who could have been Lee Harvey Oswald, gave a warning to the FBI stating that 4 Cubans were headed to Chicago to shoot Kennedy. The following day, a landlady reported to the Chicago police that she had rented a room to 4 people that had rifles with telescopic sights and a sketch of the motorcade. The FBI passed that on to the Secret Service, and the Secret Service botched the surveillance of these 4 individuals. 2 of them escaped, but they actually picked up 2 of the snipers, and they detained them. They were stonewalled by the snipers. They didn't get any information out of them. While this was going on, there was another threat coming in from another alternate patsy named Thomas Arthur Valle, who was making open and loud threats that he would assassinate Kennedy. They only picked him up when Kennedy canceled his trip on November 2nd at 10 in the morning. One day before the trip, the Diem brothers had been assassinated. And that was the stated reason for the cancellation of the trip to Chicago. What you found in Valle and the whole Chicago plot is so many similarities to what eventually happened in Dallas that it can't be considered coincidental. Valle, if we compare him to Oswald, is an ex-Marine. He had been posted like Oswald in the Far East on a station that was linked to the CIA because there were U-2 surveillance planes on it. It was easy to portray him as disgruntled, anti-Kennedy, a loner, armed. He had another intelligence link that he shared with Oswald in that he trained Cuban exiles for combat, which was a CIA responsibility. And Oswald, we know, at least offered to do that. He most likely did train Cuban exiles, but we know he tried to. Oswald, as we know, was moved from New Orleans to Dallas in October to be there just at the right time for the motorcade. And he's placed in a tall building where he gets a job. He's adjacent to the perfect kill zone. Now, if we look at what happened to Valle, he's moved like a pawn in August from Long Island to Chicago to be in there in time for the motorcade. And where does he get a job? In a tall building adjacent to the motorcade, with a perfect view of a kill zone. It would have forced Kennedy's motorcade to do a sharp turn, slow down, and be in a point where you could have had perfect triangulation of fire.
And what about the trip to Florida?
On November 18th, Kennedy was scheduled to do a 27-mile-long motorcade in Tampa. The Secret Service was very nervous about the Floridian hotel where the motorcade would have gone by. It would have forced a sharp turn. Nobody fired away at him, but in this case, the alternate patsy would have been a Gilbert Policarpo Lopez. He was a Cuban exile. He attended Fair Play for Cuba committee meetings. One day after the assassination, on November 23rd, he makes his way to Mexico City. The Fair Play for Cuba committee loaned him money for his travel, and he ends up being the lone passenger on an airplane to Cuba. The CIA, they found out about the Fair Play for Cuba committee, the weird trip to Mexico City, the fact that he was a lone passenger on a plane to Cuba, and they didn't pass on the information to the Warren Commission. So when the HSCA found out about this lead that wasn't pursued, even they called it egregious.
And what do you think was the relevance of it?
Well, if he had been assassinated in Tampa, Lopez, he would have been the potential patsy. If they had to admit to a front shot, because Oswald was behind, there were rumors that he had assisted Oswald in the assassination in Dallas.
Had anyone tried to speak to the Warren Commission about these incidents?
Abraham Bolden was the first black Secret Service agent assigned to the White House detail, and he was handpicked by Kennedy. He was in Chicago when this plot went down, so he was there when the Secret Service was briefed about the 4 snipers, and he witnessed how much the security was lax for Chicago. And he also witnessed, after the assassination, the steps that were taken to keep the Chicago plot completely secret. No paper trail, compartmentalized, agents ordered to keep silent about it. This information did not make its way to Secret Service agents that were protecting Kennedy for future motorcades, including Dallas.
Secret Service agent Elmer Moore was aware of Agent Bolden and the Chicago plot.
I met with Elmer 3 times face-to-face. Several phone calls, very short, one very long one. I first asked him, did you ever interview Thomas Arthur Valley? And he says, oh, Washington wouldn't let me see the files on that. I said, oh, well, what about a man, a Secret Service agent by the name of Abraham Bolden? His demeanor completely changed. He stood up from his chair, he pulled out his revolver, and he put it in the table and right in front of me. He leaned over the table, and he says, Jim, tell me right now, who are you working for? I said, I'm an independent researcher. He told me in a very loud voice and with a very stern look on his face, that goddamn lying nigger, we finally got him. I said, you got him? He says, no. He said, Kelly and the chief got him. I think that Moore and the rest of his crew were scared speechless that Bolden knew something.
Abraham Bolden was one person who did try to say what he knew to the Warren Commission, but they blocked him. He was blocked from talking and eventually railroaded into some phony crime and put into jail for a number of years.
Moore leaned back in his big, comfortable leather chair and he said, who killed Jack Kennedy? Then he said, well, I'll tell you who didn't with 100% certainty. It wasn't the Russians. And my head is starting to swim. I wanted to break in right at that point. But then he said, I'll tell you why. JFK was the Russians' boy. He was giving away everything he could. That the man, for all intents and purposes, he says, dare I say it? He said, Jim, I will say it. JFK was a traitor.
I think Mr. Kennedy has done some significant things in civil rights, and I would include the Attorney General. I think both of these men are men of genuine goodwill, and I think there is a necessity now to see the urgency of the moment.
Although we focused primarily on foreign policy, we cannot overlook Kennedy's battles in the South with Governor Ross Barnett of Mississippi, and in that June of '63 with Governor George Wallace of Alabama.
I'm asking from you an unequivocal assurance that you will not bar entry to these students and that you will step aside peacefully, do your constitutional duty.
In both showdowns using federal troops, the Kennedy administration wanted admission of black students to the last public colleges in the South. George Wallace made it clear that this fight was not over.
And the South next year, will decide who the next president is. Whoever the South votes for will be the president. And you're going to see that the South is going to be against some folks.
That night, Kennedy addressed the nation in what many consider the finest presidential speech on civil rights since Abraham Lincoln.
And that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed? 100 years of delay have passed since President Lincoln freed the slaves, yet their heirs, their grandsons, are not fully free. And this nation, for all its hopes and all its boasts, will not be fully free until all its citizens are free. We face, therefore, a moral crisis as a country and a people. And this is a matter which concerns this country and what it stands for. And in meeting it, I ask the support of all of our citizens. Thank you very much.
In 1960, The Congo had been granted its independence from Belgian colonial rule and carried out a democratic election. In the disorder of the transition, the Belgians, backed by England and France, sought to eliminate its charismatic prime minister, Patrice Lumumba. Eisenhower and CIA Director Allen Dulles favored the European nation in this colonial conflict.
Eisenhower gave the go-ahead to have Lumumba assassinated. Kennedy never knew this. He gets elected the following November of 1960, and he heads in the opposite direction.
To those new states whom we welcome to the ranks of the free, we pledge our word that one form of colonial control shall not have passed away, merely to be replaced by a far more iron tyranny.
But events are already in motion. With the backing of British and U.S. intelligence and arms, Colonel Joseph Mobutu's forces captured President Lumumba at the beginning of December 1960.
Dag Hammarskjöld, the UN Secretary General, calls JFK, who's the president-elect at this point, and asked him to intercede to get Lumumba released from prison. When Kennedy intervenes to save Lumumba, that's a signal directly to the CIA that they had to dispatch this guy immediately. And so 48 hours before Kennedy takes the oath of office, Lumumba is delivered into the hands of his enemies. He's taken out and shot in the head. Kennedy doesn't know this until a month later.
Who finally tells him? The CIA? No. They still keep it a secret. He's informed by his UN ambassador, Adlai Stevenson. His face crumples. He's holding his hand. He's grimacing in anguish, hearing about the assassination of Patrice Lumumba.
Within a very short period of time after the assassination, Hammarskjöld died in a mysterious plane crash. The photographs show his body as the only one not burned or charred, and he had a playing card, reportedly the ace of spades, stuffed into his shirt collar above the knot of the tie. There are controversial documents that indicate Allen Dulles was involved in the sabotage of the plane.
John Foster Dulles and Allen Dulles, they felt, what they had to say was good enough for the rest of the world, that they knew more than the president. There were things they didn't tell Eisenhower that they were doing under his administration.
And actually, Jack Kennedy does move to decapitate the top of the CIA. He lets it be known that Allen Dulles, as well as his two top advisors, Richard Bissell, who was also very involved with the Bay of Pigs, and General Cabell, who was the right-hand man to Allen Dulles. So the top three people in the CIA, Kennedy forces them out before the end of the year.
Have you ever committed any act of violence in your life? No.
By the fall of 1963, Kennedy had made many enemies. He was working on an American withdrawal from Vietnam, an upcoming state visit to Indonesia in '64, an independent, unified democracy in the Congo, through Nasser, a balanced policy in the Middle East, normalization of relations with Cuba, and a détente with Russia, even going so far as to offer them a joint mission to the moon. But on November 22nd, another face of America asserted itself.
Several thousand enthusiastic Texans are on hand to give the President and Mrs. Kennedy a warm welcome.
On that day, the world changed. Lyndon Johnson did not have the understanding of third world countries, nor did he have the anti-colonial sympathies that President Kennedy had. Therefore, numerous changes in foreign policy took place within a very short period of time after the assassination.
President Johnson did a 180-degree turn in terms of Congo policy. The U.S., which under Kennedy was a champion of African nationalism and the lead peacekeeper in the Congo, becomes the agent of white reactionary nationalism and imperialism, led by the Belgians and the South Africans, and of all things, the anti-Castro Cubans.
CIA now began to furnish planes and Cuban exile pilots to fly sorties to stamp out the rebellion. According to one pilot, the CIA manned the embassy and brought members of a secret operation from the Bay of Pigs, codenamed Operation 40.
All of whom mount this operation to return a reactionary government to power under Joseph Mobutu, and to bring Moise Tshombe, who was the secessionist leader of Katanga, back in as prime minister. And it was as if the United States had never really had, this deep association with African nationalism under President Kennedy.
Joseph Mobutu became the front man for imperial forces, profiting in the billions from the riches of the Congo. The Congo never recovered from the assassination of Lumumba. And today, despite its natural resources, it is considered a failed state, where 80% of the population live in abject poverty.
For me, or against me.
Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Gusty Renegade in for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information with non-white people, victims of white supremacy, on what white supremacy racism is and how it works. Today's date, Friday, March 28, 2025. So I have been told the song playing in the background, importantly by Company Flow, Patriotism. Patriotism. This is our second installment on Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, the true story of the first African-American on the White House Secret Service detail and his quest for justice after the assassination of JFK. First session last week, just getting started with the book, super constructive, I hope, for all. The audio that we heard at the beginning. Wow. This would be a part of my submission. Best book clubs in the known universe. This is the part of our portfolio. So that is two different documentaries spliced together. JFK, Destiny Betrayed, and JFK Revisited. The first portion of it is JFK Revisited, and then JFK Destiny Betrayed is spliced in. Now, the same people did both of these documentaries, narrated by Whoopi Goldberg. JFK Revisited is about 2 hours. JFK Destiny Betrayed is 4 installments. That is 4 hours in total. But it covers a lot of the same subject matter, just slightly different edits and different information. Now, I watched JFK Revisited with no idea Abraham Bolden was going to pop up in the film. Whoa. Then, after Abraham Bolden pops up, Patrice Lumumba pops. Oh, my God. You talk about, wow, serendipity and confirmation of everything we have been talking about for about the past year here at the Katherine Massey Book Club and C.O.W.S in general. Now, getting into the details, when they get into all that about, there was an earlier plot on JFK's life in Chicago. Ex-Marine Thomas Valle Lopez, suspected racist, where this guy was going to be maybe the Patsy Oswald type who's going to be blamed for this in Chicago. I think this might come up in the book. I haven't read this yet, but we shall see. They say that's what Abraham Bolden was trying to blow the whistle, as they say, on. And then down in Florida had this same thing, Gilberto Policarpo Lopez. And in fact, we can see if there's any information on these individuals in the new thousands of pages that were released. This is one of those where you can grouse, where they said last week, where these files are not searchable, where it would be so easy to just put these names in and see where it pops up, what do they have to say, that sort of thing, as opposed to having to wade through thousands of pages to see if they have new details. Now, When they get to that part about Abraham Bolden, he wants to explain all this and how this is buried, how they don't even really talk about this when they discuss JFK's assassination, that, wow, he was hunted the last 2-3 months? Wow, that's stunning. Elmer Moore, white man, Secret Service, they say they go to talk to him. And he says, when they ask Elmer Moore, what about Abraham Bolden and these plots in Chicago and Florida? And Abraham Bolden whips out that pistol. Who are you working for? And he says, we got that nigger. And the white journalist asks him, he says, you got Abraham Bolden? He said, no. The crew got him. So who is the crew? They put the pictures and the names up. The crew is Thomas J. Kelly, inspector of the Secret Service, and then chief of the Secret Service, James J. Rowley. That's who got that nigger, Abraham Bolden. Now, how much clout does James J. Rowley have, former chief of the Secret Service? Now they had the James J. Rowley Training Center, affectionately known as the JJRTC, comprised of almost 500 acres of land, 6 miles of roadway, and 31 buildings. That is a training facility for the Secret Service agents. The James J. Rowley Training Center. I bet they teach you there. They teach you, this is how you get that Negro. Next, Alan Dulles. When they get to that part where they ask, have you ever committed an act of violence? They were talking to Alan Dulles. We've been talking about Alan Dulles for a year in the Katherine Massey Book Club. All the way back, was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? And I mean, at the very beginning of the book, before we get to Kool-Aid, any of that, Alan Dulles, foundation of the CIA, Silicon Valley, and all of that. Dr. William Shockley, population control of the Negro population all over the world. That is the foundation for was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? Nazi Germany, the White Knight, and its connection to Nazi Germany, and in fact, Nazis being rescued. We will give you refuge to come here, and we'll use your scientific expertise to found the CIA. That was the beginning of was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment. And then some of the very same white people that were mentioned in that book, Jonestown CIA medical experiment and the founding of the CIA, are mentioned in Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, which was the last 3 books that we read. And I mean exact same people. I said exact even same scenes where they had Alan Dulles in Soundtrack to Coup d'etat talking about killing Patrice Lumumba, and then Alan Dulles in JFK Revisited about assassinating JFK, and the same white man puffing on his pipe, Welsing moment when they have you ever committed an act of violence? Now, this is a pivotal figure in 2 films about presidents being assassinated, prime ministers being assassinated within 2 years of each other, and his name is right in the center of it. He just violence. No, I'm a peaceful man. In fact, even on the Michael Swango, his whole book's on Alan Dulles and his family. Poisoner in chief. We're so refined. We don't have to shoot you. Blow your brains out in broad daylight, although we can do that too. We Swango you too, and nobody ever knows what happened to you. So we connect everything that we've been reading for the last, and then even the name. If I had known, because I have looked at JFK information for some time, they will call this, some will say that Kennedy was killed by the right wing. Hardliners. Right-wing extremists. That's, the type of language that they will use. Some people. They got whole books. The Nazis killed Kennedy. What I just said about the Nazis. CIA was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment. Nazis being brought over by white people after World War II to help found the CIA. Some of the blame seeming like it might be laid at their feet about this assassination and cover-up and all the rest of it. Woo! Everything we've been talking about for the last year. It's almost same people that were involved with Jonestown, same people that were involved with JFK's assassination, Patrice Lumumba's assassination, MLK's assassination, all the same people. White people. In fact, it even had to go back and get that line from was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment. It's from page 3 of the book. It's from page 3 of a 600-page book where it says, while the Allies were fighting countries, the Nazis were fighting people. And this basic conceptual difference permitted both sides to win. The Allies won a military victory over Germany, but Germany won a social and political victory over the United States, where their philosophy was embraced by many German Americans who today comprise the largest ethnic group in the country. Eisenhower, German American, who we got to kill this nigger Lumumba right now. I hadn't even gotten the granular level of Kennedy is about to come to power right as Patrice Lumumba is assassinated. They say this nigger Kennedy, this nigger lover Kennedy, as we were told last week, he might try to intervene and help out old Lumumba. We got to kill this nigger right now. And some of that is explicitly in the film Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. That's why I said same people, same names. Like, woo! The Dag Hammarskjöld, I Could Kill Myself. They had a whole documentary on Dag Hammarskjöld at the Seattle International Film Festival last year, and I missed it. I didn't even grasp what I missed until way, way too late. I will be locked in this time around. They have pictures of his body. He was killed about 6 months after Lumumba's assassination, 2 years before Kennedy's assassination. This is a white man, Dag Hammarskjöld, and they got pictures. He's got an ace of spades in his collar, like, what? And the same names. Alan Dulles pop up there too. We got a way of dealing with nigger lovers. Now, I'm not even saying Dag Hammarskjöld is not a racist. Same thing I don't say for Kennedy. I don't say not all white people is racist. White people do argue about how we gonna run the plantation, and it might even mean we might have to kill some other white people because we disagree about how to run the niggers. Seen that before. That does not mean not all white people is racist. That's it. Last bit. Our timing remains impeccable. Dikembe Mutombo passed while we were reading Andre Bloom's book, Soundtrack to Coup d'etat. George Foreman passes away right as we begin this book. Most every article I have seen, they do not talk about no George Foreman without talking about Rumble in Kinshasa. They've had an article that this fight changed the fate of George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, and the Congo. Come on. And I said same thing I said with everything else. All of these are CIA events. Rumble in the Jungle, assassination of JFK, assassination of Patrice Lumumba, Jonestown, all CIA events. Katherine Massey Book Club, audio segment number 1, The Echo from Dealey Plaza.
Chapter 6. In mid-July, the chief of the White House detail, James Rowley, asked me to report to the Treasury Building for an exit interview with U.E. Bauman, Chief of the United States Secret Service. Chief Bauman, a veteran of more than 30 years in the service, was a tall, distinguished-looking man. Upon entering, I noticed that his office appeared to be in disarray. Documents were scattered all over his desk and stacked on every surface, including the tops of the file cabinets. Without looking up from the papers in front of him, he asked me what I thought of my assignment on the White House detail. Meeting the President and being around the White House were okay, I answered, but I think that I prefer to work out in the field on counterfeiting and check cases. I like the investigative side of the job more than the protective. You were only here for the 30-day period. Sometimes all of the travel is hard, especially on one's family, Bauman said. Do you have any particular observations that you would like to make? Even as he asked the question, the chief was reaching into a drawer for a fresh stack of papers, and kept himself busy thumbing through them. I didn't know it at the time, but the chief had resigned from the service, effective within the next 30 days. I was probably watching him page through the residue of his career. I explained to Chief Bauman that I had expected to encounter some form of racism when I came to Washington, but was nonetheless surprised by what I found. My biggest disappointment was that the only racists I ran into were members within the Secret Service. There were a couple of incidents where the word nigger was used in my presence, I said. Without hesitation, I identified the agents involved and described the times and places of those instances. I think you took the right course of action, Bauman said. You can bet that I will look into the matter and discuss it with Chief Rowley over there when I see him. He looked up from his papers, his attention now focused on me. I went on to tell him that I thought the training I had received during the 30-day stay was inadequate. Every time I asked an agent what to do in case of this or that situation, the response was always, play it by ear. I described how at one point, when the president went to the State Department auditorium for a news conference, another agent handed me an AR-15 automatic weapon. When I told him that I didn't know how to operate the weapon, the agent had just smiled and said, fake it. The chief was leaning back and looking at me, apparently disturbed by what he was hearing. Something like that should never happen. You should not have been given the gun unless you were qualified to use it. Finally, I said that there was too much drinking of alcohol by the agents guarding the president, and that I had witnessed agents drinking liquor on the press plane going to Hyannisport. 2 of the agents were high, in my opinion. The chief took a small notebook out of his desk drawer. And who were those agents? He wrote down the names as I spoke them. The drinking and partying by the agents in the Presidential Protection Detail were common knowledge throughout our agency. It wasn't my intention to get any particular agents in trouble, and I told the chief so. I got the sense that he wasn't in a forgiving mood any longer when he said somewhat icily that while there was no prohibition against agents relaxing when not on duty, the shift supervisors were responsible for seeing that everyone on duty was able to perform their duties to the fullest, especially around the president. I shook hands with Chief Bauman, signaling the end of my tenure on the White House detail, and at 9 p.m. that night, I boarded a plane for Chicago. The very next morning, I was back at my desk in the Chicago office. I had barely begun sifting through a month's worth of mail and new case assignments when my superiors summoned me to find out about my stint in Washington. I sat down with SAIC Harry Guylan and James Burke, his second in command. In contrast to his unkempt appearance and sloppy manners, Burke had a reputation as an absolute stickler who knew the Secret Service manual backward and forward and let it guide his every action and decision on the job. He was single-minded and detail-oriented, notorious around the office for making agents redo entire reports because of a single misspelled word or misplaced comma. And God help the poor soul who ever dared to question Burke's methods or his unwavering certainty. I gave Guylan and Burke a thorough account, speaking favorably of my meetings with the president and most of the other agents. I spoke about the trips to Glenora and Hyannisport, eventually getting around to the drinking I'd witnessed on the detail, on the press plane, and in Hyannis. Agent Burke pounced on this information. They shouldn't be drinking during duty hours under any circumstances. The manual clearly forbids that. Did you report that to Rowley? He asked, referring to the chief of the White House detail. No, I didn't say anything to him, but before I left Washington, I discussed it with Chief Bauman, I answered. You should have spoken directly to Rowley about the drinking. That's serious, and if what you say is true, someone should be fired. Then I told him about the incident at the cottage when Agent Henderson had thrown the word nigger in my face. What a big jerk, Guylan commented. Burke nodded in agreement, but said only, You can't be too thin-skinned. I suppose the Secret Service manual didn't cover this kind of thing. Now, you take our other Negro agent in New York. He's not offended by those kinds of words. As a matter of fact, I have heard him use the word nigger myself. Yeah, Abe, Guylan chimed in. You're going to run into all kinds of people on this job, and you just have to let it roll off your back. But I'm me, not another agent, and I think that for a supervisor to tell an agent something like that—" Burke interrupted. "I personally think you're being too sensitive about this whole issue. Things like that are going to happen, and you're going to have to learn not to let it bother you. I wonder what your attitude would be if I had called Harvey a white, honky, fat pig," I shot back angrily. "All we're saying is that you can't be too thin-skinned over these racial issues." For Burke, there was nothing left to discuss. I soon settled back into my old routine, handling a substantial caseload for the Chicago field office of the Secret Service. Over the next few years, I uncovered more counterfeiting plants and made more arrests involving the forgery of government checks than any other agent anywhere in the country, according to Agent John Hanley, who had become the special agent in charge of our office. Hanley, a physically imposing former admiral in the U.S. Navy who still retained his military bearing and attitude, liked and respected me, which unfortunately didn't always work to my advantage. During the period of his stewardship, he appeared on television concerning several of the big cases that I solved in the Chicago area. At meetings, he would openly refer to me as his top agent and tell other agents either to ask for my input on their cases or to try to learn from my example. I grew uncomfortable, sensing the resentment of the other agents. Before long, it was clear that few of the agents in our office were eager to cooperate with me. The arrival of Agent Maurice Martineau complicated office dynamics even more. Martineau transferred to the Chicago office in early 1963 as assistant SAIC to Agent Hanley, and eventually he took over its leadership. Animosity between Hanley and Martineau simmered from the start of their tenure together, reportedly connected to some association earlier in their careers. Hanley made no effort to hide his contempt for Martineau, and the friction between them would occasionally escalate into heated arguments that we all witnessed. I suffered personally from the tension between the two men, getting caught in the crossfire, so to speak. At one point, while I was investigating a counterfeiting case involving suspects named Frank Jones and Lee Broughton, Hanley called me into his office and instructed me not to turn in my reports to Martineau anymore. The manual was clear on this point. Normal procedure required agents to hand over reports to the assistant agent in charge for review, and I had always done so. I protested mildly, citing the manual, and Hanley replied, "I'll take care of Marty. I'm the agent in charge. If I tell you to give your reports directly to me, that is what I want you to do." He continued in his authoritative tone, "You're doing a hell of a job here, and I have to put you in for a raise. I'll discuss everything with Marty." Sure enough, Martineau called me into his office after one of our weekly meetings not long thereafter and warned me that I was not following procedures as set forth in the manual. "Mr. Hanley told me to bring my reports directly to him," I said in my defense. Martineau pounded his fist on the desk and shouted, "Mr. Hanley is not the manual. Read this." He shoved an open copy of the book at me, open to the appropriate page. I jumped up from my chair and rushed to the door of Agent Hanley's office, which was actually connected to Martineau's. I was sure he had overheard the exchange between Martineau and me. Barely able to contain my own anger, I started to speak, but Hanley interrupted. "Marty, let's talk." Martineau and Hanley went at it behind the closed door of Hanley's office. One of the stenographers came over to ask me why the two men were screaming at each other, and when I explained what I knew, she said with genuine sympathy, "Ah, Abe, they're putting you in the middle." After the argument was over, Mr. Hanley sat at his desk, red-faced and sweating, obviously still fuming from his argument with Martineau. "Don't give Marty a damn thing," he thundered. "If he wants to know something about the investigations you are doing, let him come to me. You understand that?" He stood up to his full height. Knowing that Martineau could hear everything he said through the open office door, he added, "I'm the agent in charge, and as long as I am agent in charge, I'm running this goddamn office as I see fit." "Yes, sir," I spoke in a soft, placating voice. "Okay, go back to work and bust some more asses." Hanley waved me out of the room, and as I walked out past Martineau's desk, the assistant special agent in charge shot me a terrifying look. If looks could kill, I thought at that instant, I'd be one dead black man. I was always on the wrong side of Maurice Martineau. Rather than praise me for clearing so many cases, as Hanley did, Martineau would call me into his office and complain that I was hogging cases. He suggested that if I had some cases that were winding up, getting close to a successful conclusion, I could turn them over to agents in the office who weren't having the same kind of luck. When I flatly refused, he accused me of being too ambitious and uncompromising. One episode in particular cemented the bad blood between us. On November 17, 1963, I flew to Washington at the request of the Intelligence Division of the Internal Revenue Service. Joseph Harmon was the chief of the division at the time. Having been instructed that this mission was top secret, I checked into the local YMCA under an assumed name and reported to my contact agent at the Treasury building the next morning. The agent, a tanned, middle-aged gentleman with a Southern accent, politely ushered me into his office and offered me a seat. "The reason that we sent for you is that we are in the process of putting together an undercover agents program within the Intelligence Division of the IRS. We asked several of the other agencies in the government to recommend one or two of their best undercover agents for the program. These agents will be on loan to the IRS for extensive undercover operations in Washington, D.C., and in other parts of the country. The Secret Service recommended you to become part of the program." "When will the program start?" I asked, surprised. "It's already in progress. We have an assignment for you right now here in Washington." The prospect of transferring from Chicago to Washington began to interest me. "What kind of assignment, and where is it?" I asked. "The initial assignment will be inside the Capitol building. There are very influential and well-connected employees in the Capitol building that are running skin games and loan sharking and other employees. We need a man inside to infiltrate the group and get information as to who is behind the operation and how much money is being raked in. These people aren't paying any taxes and are draining the lower workers of their paychecks. These are, as I said, well-connected people, and some of them work directly for senators and congressmen on Capitol Hill." "And when will I have to start?" "You can't start until we have everything set up for you to go in. There has to be a lot of preparation made for you to infiltrate this group of people. They are smart and know how to get things done in Washington, and there's a lot of money involved here." I couldn't help being intrigued. "So what kind of preparations are we talking about?" The agent explained that the first step would be a complete change of identity for me. I would be given another name, and all official references to Abraham Bolden, birth and marriage certificates, employment records, everything, would be erased. There would, in fact, be no more records of an Abraham Bolden that could be traceable to you, he explained, or to anyone that has been associated with you in the past. My eagerness quickly turned to uneasiness. If they can actually do that, I thought, I'll never be able to prove that I am who I really am. Something felt vaguely wrong about the whole proposition. "I'll have to think this over," I said. "Okay, think it over and let us know your decision as soon as possible. We'll be looking to hear from you through your proper channels." I left the Treasury building and began walking back to the YMCA. My route on this sunny and mild November day took me down Pennsylvania Avenue, past the White House. My mind filled with thoughts of Kennedy, who was in Florida at the time. Throughout the service, rumors were flying about threats on the president's life. Reports had circulated in the agency about Cuban dissidents and right-wing Southerners who were stalking him and plotting his assassination. Each weekly meeting brought information about some new organized group with a plot of its own. Suspects had actually been detained in Chicago and in Palm Beach. At the beginning of the month, in fact, A high-powered rifle had been confiscated from a suspected assassin in Chicago. Concerns for Kennedy's safety in our city were so high that Kennedy was forced to cancel a trip during the first week of November. As I turned my gaze to the White House, I saw something that stopped me cold. The front gate and the first floor of the building were in sharp and vivid focus on this bright, clear autumn day, but the upper floors were strangely indistinct, obscured by a thick white mass, as if a single cloud hovered over the president's window on this cloudless day. I looked away quickly and saw nothing like that cloudy obstruction near any of the other buildings nearby, but when I turned back to the White House, there it still sat. I closed each eye in turn, again checking my vision, but the cloud remained, covering only the upper floors of the White House. I can't say why exactly, but I was immediately overwhelmed by the conviction that what I had just seen was a vision, and that this vision had meaning. Knowing that the Secret Service and other agencies were at that very moment investigating grave conspiracies against the president that were highly organized, I felt certain that Kennedy's life was in mortal danger. I flew home the following day and told Barbara about my vision as soon as I arrived. She reacted somewhat cautiously, either because she was suspicious of the very idea of such a phenomenon, or because she believed in the reality of the vision but didn't trust my interpretation of it. The next morning at the office, Charlotte, a secretary to whom I often confided such things, was even more skeptical. Later, Agent Martineau, who had been appointed acting special agent in charge after Hanley was transferred to the Paris, France office, summoned me to his office and listened intently as I recounted my meeting with the IRS and explained their proposed assignment. "Well, what are you going to do?" Martineau asked. "I'm going to turn the assignment down," I answered quickly. "I'm not accepting any assignment that will change my identity and involve moving to Washington, D.C. I joined the Secret Service. I'm not interested in being an IRS undercover investigator." Martineau exploded, almost as if he had been expecting something like this. "Damn, Abe! Where do you come off choosing what you're going to do around here? What are you, some prima donna or something?" His anger seemed to erupt from nowhere. "You don't decide what you're going to do around here. That bullshit might have been okay when Hanley was here, but it's going to stop now," he said angrily. "I'm not accepting the investigation," I repeated firmly as I stormed out of his office. I shared the story of my vision with some others, including another black agent in the Chicago office, Conrad Cross. Cross took it no more seriously than he had my previous observations about the inept protection provided by the White House detail. He had the same kind of cavalier attitude as the Washington agents, contributing to my growing certainty that Kennedy's days were numbered. And then it happened. On the afternoon of November 22nd, 1963, I was in a bar on 38th and Indiana in Chicago, interviewing the owner in the course of an investigation. The drone of the small black and white television behind the bar was interrupted by words that most of us will never forget. "President Kennedy has been shot." In the silence that followed, every person in the room turned toward the screen. "The president has been shot," the announcer repeated. "We will now join Walter Cronkite in New York." I didn't wait to hear Cronkite, but rushed out to my car and sped back to the Secret Service office. "They shot the president," Margie called out to me as I got off the elevator. Inside the office, Agent Joe Noonan was pacing back and forth in a barely controlled rage. He had served 3 years on the White House detail and shared my view of the conduct and overconfidence of the agents on that detail. "I knew it would happen," he shouted, waving his arms. "I told those playboys that someone was going to get the president killed if they kept acting like they did. Now it's happened." Noonan's pacing grew more rapid as he resumed his rant. "I'd like to see the faces of all those guys on the detail now who told me that nobody wants to kill President Kennedy," he sneered. Martineau, for his part, instructed the secretary not to admit anyone in the Secret Service offices, and then shut himself in his own office, muttering, "This could mean the end of the Secret Service." June Marie Turpinus, one of the agency's pool stenographers, came up to me with tears in her eyes and told me that when she heard that President Kennedy had been shot, she rushed into Martineau's office and gave him the news. According to June, Martineau's response had been a cold, "So what else is new?" Sobbing, June said that Martineau acted like he didn't care one way or the other. At a meeting of all the Chicago agents during the week of Kennedy's state funeral, we received orders from the chief's office in Washington. We were not to discuss Kennedy's protection, regardless of who asked us. We were told to channel all inquiries concerning the protection of President Kennedy through the chief's office. I remember thinking, protection? What protection? The message from Washington made it clear that anyone who violated the directive would be dealt with severely. The assassination of John F. Kennedy on November 22, 1963, represented a turning point in my own career in the Secret Service. Before Dallas, I had voiced my opinion of the President's protection detail to colleagues and superiors in the Chicago office. I told anyone who would listen that I didn't believe the agents on the White House detail would act swiftly or appropriately to stop an attempt on the President's life. A long line of superiors, from Harry Guyline and James Burke to Maurice Martineau, tried to tell me that I was overreacting, that things appeared lax to me only because I was new to the detail. The senior agents struck me as arrogant and overconfident, and saw to it that nobody acknowledged the apprehension of any less experienced agents regarding the President's safety. I even told my story to a Secret Service inspector, Thomas J. Kelly, who visited the Chicago office just after I returned from the White House detail. I told Kelly everything I had seen and everything that had happened to me in Washington, and although he promised me that he'd look into it all, I heard nothing from him or from Chief Rowley prior to the assassination. The senior agent's cocksure attitudes governed right up to the moment of Kennedy's death. One of the younger agents riding on the car behind the presidential limousine heard what sounded to him like a rifle shot. He started to jump from the running board to assist the president, just as Agent Clint Hill had to run to protect the First Lady. But the young agent was called back to the follow-up car by a more senior agent, just as the third and fatal shot tore into the back of the president's skull. The same inspector, Kelly, to whom I had previously complained about the laxity of the Secret Service agents surrounding the president, oversaw the Dallas investigation of Kennedy's assassination. After the assassination, I saw one suspicious action after another on the part of Secret Service personnel, all of which left me convinced that the service wanted to present its own carefully orchestrated version of its performance to the Warren Commission and other official bodies that were investigating the assassination. By this time, my own disenchantment with the service was no secret. Beginning in January 1964, just after the assassination, orders started coming down from my supervisors that hinted at an effort to withhold, or at least to color, the truth. The first involved a suspect in the actual assassination. I was the night duty agent that week in November, which meant that all calls that came into our office after working hours were routed to my home phone. 2 nights after the events in Dallas, I received a call from SAIC Forrest Sorrells of the Dallas office at about 10 p.m., looking for Agent Martineau. Sorrells said he was in the Dallas police station and that he and Inspector Kelly had interviewed Lee Harvey Oswald, who had mentioned the name John Hurd. I don't know if it's spelled H-E-A-R-D, H-U-R-D, H-E-R-D, or H-U-R-T. I'm giving you the phonetic sound, he explained. I want you to tell Martineau to drop everything he's doing out there and put every agent possible on tracking down anyone who has the name John Hurd. This is top priority, and we need to get this done as soon as possible. He went on to ask about the outcome of the investigation of a Chicago gun shop called Klein's, as if he assumed that any agent in our office would have been aware of it. I couldn't tell him a thing, because I had never heard of the case. Well, Sorrells concluded with some urgency, tell Martineau to get on this right away. Every agent should be assigned to identifying this man. I couldn't reach Martineau until around midnight, and when I did, he was none too pleased. "What the hell does he want us to do? Run out in our pajamas? We'll take care of it tomorrow morning." In fact, Martineau did mobilize every agent and secretary in the Chicago office first thing the next morning. We pored over every file and register in our office, compiling a list of people named John Hurd, H-U-R-D, H-E-A-R-D, H-E-R-D, H-U-R-T, or similar. ASAIC Martineau instructed us to track down every person who fit the profile and to notify him when we had located each one. He also made it clear that we were not to interview any of these suspects unless we cleared it with him. The search turned up several likely candidates, and we turned over the information to Agent Martineau. Yet not only were no arrests ever made connected to this investigation, but we never heard another word about it from Martineau. No follow-up, not even any feedback, even though he had demanded we turn over every scrap of paper, every note and scribble generated by our search. I couldn't help wondering how we could have gotten an urgent nighttime call instructing us to drop everything and chase down this John Hurd, as other Secret Services offices around the country presumably did as well, and yet that name never came up in any official report or investigation, nor in any press account of the assassination. The second episode troubled me even more. Immediately after the assassination, several newspapers reported the presence of an unidentified man in the area now known as the Grassy Knoll in Dealey Plaza. According to some of the accounts, a Dallas police officer had run to the Grassy Knoll just after the president was shot and encountered a neatly dressed man there. When questioned, the man reportedly presented a leather-bound commission book identifying him as an agent of the U.S. Secret Service. At the same time, rumors of the possibility of a lost commission book were circulating within the service. The story that we heard from some agents in Washington featured several of the agents who were traveling with the president going to a strip club on November 21st and staying until the early morning hours of November 22nd. At least one of them was reported to have become quite inebriated and could have either lost his Secret Service identification or had it lifted off him that night. In January 1964, ASAIC Martineau announced that the Secret Service intended to update identification books throughout the agency, and that all agents needed to turn in their current identification books right away. We received newly engraved identification books about 30 days after the old ones were sent back to Washington. To the naked eye, the new books were virtually identical to the old ones except for a new photograph and the addition of a single word, "the," to the front cover. Now, instead of Treasury Department, the front cover bore the words, "The Treasury Department." To anyone who wasn't a member of the Secret Service, the old books would have been just as credible as the new ones. It seemed fairly obvious to me that the Secret Service was looking to sweep under the rug the fact that some agent had lost his identification, and the best way to do so was to issue new ID to all personnel. The service was circling its wagons at a time when many members of Congress felt the FBI should take over the protection of the president. A lost commission book could have been the last straw. How could the Secret Service protect the life of the president when it couldn't even protect its own identification books? The third instance related to a Secret Service investigation that we had begun just before Kennedy's assassination. Toward the end of October 1963, while preparations were being made for the president to visit Chicago to attend the annual Army-Navy game at Soldier Field, a phone call came into our office for ASAIC Martineau. He took the call during one of our regular meetings, so the agents present heard his side of the conversation. He said that he didn't have enough personnel to look into whatever matter had been discussed. "All of our agents are tied up at the moment, and we don't have anyone to send over there," he said firmly to whoever was on the other end of the line. When he hung up, Martineau explained that the call had been from the Chicago office of the FBI, which had information possibly concerning the president's upcoming trip. A woman who owned a rooming house on the city's north side had gone into one of the rooms to do some housekeeping and had discovered 2 rifles equipped with telescopic sights. She had rented the room to 2 men she believed to be Hispanic and had also seen 2 white men going in and out of the room. Knowing that the president was due to visit Chicago, she grew concerned and called the authorities. Martineau professed to believe that this was not yet a Secret Service matter, and that there had been no direct threat to the president in connection with these rifles. He felt strongly that this problem fell under FBI jurisdiction, especially since the service didn't have the resources to investigate every individual who had a rifle and disliked John Kennedy. As we all sat there listening, Martineau called the office of James Rowley, who had become chief of the Secret Service. When he got off the phone, he told us that we were, in fact, going to investigate the case. 3 agents were dispatched to interview the woman at the rooming house. I was not involved, since they anticipated tailing the suspects in a predominantly white part of Chicago, but at one point I was able to listen in on the car radio for several hours while our agents followed the suspected assassins. Amazingly, they botched the surveillance and lost the suspects. One of the agents had neglected to turn off his 2-way radio, which went off with a loud squawk, a transmission from Martineau back at the office, as the agents drove past the suspects in an alleyway behind the rooming house. The suspects bolted, and our guys promptly lost them in traffic. The investigation was abruptly terminated, and the chief was notified. Just a few days before the shooting in Dallas, the Secret Service received even more threatening information, this time about a group of anti-Castro Cuban activists allegedly plotting to assassinate the president. Homer S. Echevarria had been overheard to make a statement to the effect that Kennedy was about to be taken care of. Instead of immediately contacting the White House detail, which was with the president in Fort Worth, Texas, ASAIC Martineau assigned several of his agents in Chicago to look into the matter. None of our agents was able to get next to Echevarria, and the investigation fell apart. Later, when the Warren Commission convened to investigate the assassination, the chief of the Secret Service feared that agents who were on duty in Dallas that day might be held accountable in some way. With the president dead and his alleged killer, Lee Harvey Oswald, known to have had Cuban connections, the investigation of Echevarria took on new urgency, and some of the Chicago agents tried to revive the case, but to no avail. I sat in the cubicle next to one of the agents who had been involved with both threats in the Chicago area, so I could overhear his conversations. I listened to him dictating his reports and complaining about the progress of the investigation. It seemed that this agent thought Echevarria was a gun runner for the CIA, and that a contact agent from the CIA had called Martineau to inquire about the Echevarria case. The agent was unhappy, concerned that whatever the connection was between Echevarria and the FBI or CIA, one or both of those agencies might have been interfering with his investigation. In early December, Agent Martineau called us together to tell us that the FBI was taking over the Echevarria case and that our investigation was to terminate immediately. He told us to turn all documents, reports, notebooks, scribblings, and support files into him, and he would in turn forward them to the chief's office by special courier. He warned us not to discuss the case with anyone, anywhere. In fact, he said we should forget that the Echevarria case had ever existed. Reports in this case had been dictated by agents in Martineau's office and typed by a particular secretary. When they were delivered, with all the other relevant paperwork, by special air courier to Washington, D.C., they were delivered into the hands of Paul J. Paterny, Deputy Chief of the United States Secret Service. 1 week later, the chief's office in Washington sent an order that all copies of reports relating to the advanced security arrangements for President Kennedy in Chicago be removed from the files and delivered to Washington. My understanding, from conversations that I heard between the office secretaries, was that the chief's office communicated this same order verbally to field offices across the country. The field reports reported to by this order were the reports that Secret Service advance teams prepared prior to any presidential visit to any location. The reports covered all necessary precautions in that location, determined who would be responsible for those precautions, and specified transportation plans and routes to and from each location, each stop within that location, and other security details. A copy of such a report would be filed with the field office with authority over a location, and other copies would be distributed to the upper echelons of the service. If all copies of all such reports were removed from all offices except that of the chief, he would be the only one in a position to provide investigators, such as the Warren Commission, with information regarding the security around the president at any given time or any given location, and there would be no way to verify or refute that information. My relationship with Maurice Martineau continued to decline. It was like our own private Cold War that occasionally erupted into open confrontation. He never made any effort to hide his contempt for me, and I can't say I did a lot better. One morning I was sitting at my desk when the phone rang. I picked it up and leaned back in my chair to have a conversation. Looking up, I saw, tied to the ceiling light above me, a rope, a hangman's noose. The moment Martineau came to work, I walked him into my office and showed him the noose. Someone's just joking around, Martineau said, rather lightly. I'll call maintenance and have it removed. The fact that he didn't seem to be taking it seriously outraged me. I think we should call a meeting and find out who tied this rope over my desk. Don't be so thin-skinned, Martineau answered, as if I had never heard that before. They're just having fun with you. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. You'll get the whole service in trouble over a joke like this. As he stalked out of the office, he added, I'll call maintenance and get them up here. I asked each of the agents assigned to the office about the noose hanging from my ceiling, but of course nobody knew the slightest thing about it. To be sure, Maurice Martineau, Assistant Special Agent in charge, made no further move to get to the bottom of things. The rift between us widened by the day. Overt gestures of racism such as this were rare, but the normal course of work offered Martineau plenty of opportunities to let me know where I stood with him. By way of example, there was a case in February 1964 in which I was investigating an alleged counterfeiting operation in the basement of a church. The pastor of the church identified the young man to whom he had entrusted 2 small presses and other printing equipment for the printing of flyers and programs for the congregation. I picked up the suspect, who promptly confessed to using the equipment to make counterfeit money. He went with me to the church, unlocked the basement, and showed me the array of printing and photographic plates he used in his operation, not to mention some of the actual counterfeit bills. It would all have to be seized as evidence. I radioed the office from the car, got Agent Martineau on the other end, and asked him to send some agents to the church to help me collect, catalog, and transport all the seized materials and equipment. We don't have anybody to help you, Abe. With a slightly nasty chuckle, he added, When did you start needing help anyway? It was the middle of the afternoon, the time of day when agents usually return to the office to prepare their daily reports. I slammed the radio down and drove back with the suspect actually holding some of the confiscated machinery in his lap. Later, he helped me unload the instruments of his own undoing into the back room of the Secret Service office. In the office, we found Martineau sitting around making casual chit-chat with no less than 4 other agents, half of them lounging with their feet propped up on their desks.
Got nigger jokes to tell. You know, I don't have time to help no nigger load equipment. You grab janitor or, whatever, get some of your nigger friends from the church. We got nigger jokes, the documents to shred and hide. We got time to come out and help no nigger not even supposed to be in the office with us. No way. Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. We will resume Chapter 7. Oh my goodness. it would have been a different world. I would have still learned a lot, been right here, so much workplace racism, but whew. Can I say it again? Elmer Moore told us again, all of this, you can see the video in JFK Revisited. Elmer Moore, white man, pulled that pistol out on the table. Who are you working for? What is this? You gonna mention that nigger Abraham Bolden? What is this all about? Said, we got that nigger. Who got the nigger? Not me. They. Who is they? Thomas J. Kelly, Chief James J. Rowley. Can I say that one more time? They got the JJRTC, comprised of almost 500 acres. They say one football field is an acre. That's 500 football fields. 6 miles of roadway and 31 buildings. Is that the reward that you get? We got that nigger good. That's the reward you get when you get a nigger good. That's the fella, in fact, Rowley, JJRTC, that's what they call it, JJRTC, 500 acres. That's the fella, he said, they boozing and drinking and unprofessional and nigger jelly. We get to all that, And ain't nothing happened. But it did happen. 500 acres happened. Katherine Massey Book Club. Whew. You can look for all those names right in the files. See if any new tidbits came out about any of these individuals as we read. Might have to check several times because so many thousands of documents. I can even give one more. I forgot. I have been, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, if 10 you read every document, every page, every book, you saw every film, interview, you read the whole Warren Commission report and all that, that's a 10. So you know everything about JFK. And a 1, JF who? I think I'd be below 5, but I am definitely not a 2 either. Definitely not 1, definitely not 2. I think I'm below 5, but I could not say like I was totally ignorant. Like this is something that I was kind of low-key studying, researching, reading books, trying to study a little bit prior to it bothered me greatly, even though it happened way, way, way decades before I was born. Just, wow, they killed a white man, broad daylight. President. Suspicious circumstances, and yeah. I talked to the late grandcestor, Dr. Kamal Kamban, about this. He mentioned the movie Executive Action. I even have that sound clip. I could probably cue it up right now. I have to play it later because I could play a lot of clips from that film as we proceed. But I know so much more now than when he originally told me about that film, Executive Action. That film, Mark Lane wrote the screenplay. You were with us for Jonestown. You know Mark Lane. Talked about him all last year. But that's where he got his public start was. In fact, Mark Lane is credited with, we haven't heard it yet, but the so-called magic bullet. Mark Lane is credited with coming up with that to ridicule and just point out how illogical what we are told happened in this assassination. Magic bullet theory. But that's Mark Lane. And he wrote the screenplay for Executive Action, movie that came out about this assassination, saying basically this was a government plot, CIA plot to kill Kennedy, and this plot was all about white supremacy, racism. We got to control the niggers, and he is doing way too much Vietnam and Dr. King, and just we got to do better control of our niggers. Nigger luck, we got to go. That's the premise basically of Executive Action and how white people planned all of this out and carried it out successfully. That film, it came out in 1973, just like The Spook Who Sat by the Door book that we read on the program was adapted to a film, and about the same time as the movie Executive Action, about a few years apart,
both of those films disappeared for decades. You couldn't see them for the longest. If you didn't see it when it came out then or what have you, no, you can't go to Blockbuster or Netflix, or it disappeared. Now they're back. I think Executive Action, they said that came back in the 90s when they had the Assassination Review Board and all that, but for decades, that was gone. There's so much about this case, just, wow, it is mind-boggling. Even the film of JFK being assassinated, like, nobody got to see that for about 12. Dick flippin' Gregory. He was on Geraldo. I lost my mind. Like, the times we had Dick Gregory on, we would not have even talked about his book, the James Byrd Jr., which is kind of crazy to say. We can't even talk about that. It would have just been Jonestown, JFK. Even though that's old, but we could have got that on the record. But he was on television when that film first screened. And man, woo, he was on TV when that film first screened, so the public could see, wow, what does the assassination look like? And the magic bullet, and you said, what now? Wait a minute. Man, woo, everything. The word for this case is conceal. Even you'd have to keep that for everybody who, like myself, born after all this happened. This was an era of radio. Even though people did sit around on the TV, people did not sit around and see nothing about what happened in Dallas for like over a decade. It took about 12 years before people could actually sit and see video of, whew, this is what that assassin, wow. And think for yourself about it, as opposed to just being told this is what happened. That's what it was for a long time. Anyway, Executive Action, check it out if you are interested. Racism, which again, I would have been so confused about this case. Because they don't say racism, they'll say right wing, hardliner, right wing extremist, that sort of thing. They just don't say racism, racists, white supremacy. I told you they got a book. The Nazis killed Kennedy. What? What? Especially now after reading his Jonestown and CIA medical experiment. He says, oh yeah, the Nazis built the CIA. Fighting people or fighting countries. Anyway, if you have thoughts to share, first portion, the number 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound, press star 61 if you would like to participate. Number again, 605-313-5164, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. Before we nap folks who dialed in, I will just say quickly, as a history major, that year 1963 is extraordinary for what happened in the world leading up to this assassination. It's so much could be said. You could do whole reports. People probably have done whole books just on what a year. From beginning to end, Dr. King is protesting down in Georgia, Albany campaign at the beginning of the year, ends up doing the Birmingham campaign that spring. Bull Connor sicking the dogs on little black girls. Black people are fighting back. Kennedy has to send troops into Alabama to stop all that. Minister Malcolm X talks about that, saying black people fighting back. We're not doing all that, turn the other cheek and all that jazz. Medgar Evers gets assassinated, Mississippi, June 1963. I think Kennedy had to come out on television and talk about that after he got killed. They didn't arrest anybody for that. March on Washington is being planned, and oh my God, you talk about white people
Kennedy being furious. Oh my God, these Negroes are coming, because the original plan, it was not, we're going to come and sing, we shall overcome. The original plan was, we're going to come and lay down on the mall. We're going to disrupt the airplanes and all of that. We're going to shut the whole place down until they do something about racism. That was the original plan, and white people were furious. Oh my God, these Negroes, what are we going to do? We got to round them up in COINTELPRO. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And so they infiltrated it. Minister Malcolm X gave that speech, message to the grassroots, excoriated Kennedy, and the whole White House are saying they took over something that was supposed to be radical and revolutionary and directly addressing racism and made it some nonsense so we can sing "We Shall Overcome" and endorse Kennedy's lame civil rights movement. August 28, 1963, they have the March on Washington. We shall overcome. James Baldwin writes eloquently. What's the white response? September, go back to Alabama. They bombed that church, killed 4 little girls. Many, many black people said, woo, that was a seminal moment. Like, ugh. White people, what's that tacky metaphor? White people have shown their true colors. If they hadn't already, we just go and sing nicely, didn't tear up D.C. or nothing, and you killed 4 black girls? Wow. And Kennedy was dead in 2 months. Now, a whole lot of other, that's just kind of a rough, Chicago trip in there. We just heard a little bit about that and him going down to Florida. But, I mean, hey, that is kind of nice. And by the end of the year, Minister Malcolm X is out of the Nation of Islam. Dr. King wins the Nobel Peace Prize. That is 1963 in a nutshell, roughly, at least most of the major U.S. stuff. Certainly you got anti-colonial movement, Vietnam, all that. But, wow, what a year. You heard some of that with Alabama. I forgot about the George Wallace protest. We're not letting in no niggers down here. Vivian Moore, get out of here. We don't let no niggers in the school down here. Yeah. You got all that too? What a year. And yes, in that sort of environment, oh yeah, anybody could be killed. Anybody. Anybody. And lots of people were. Let's see. Folks who dialed in with commentary, first portion of the text. Let's see. Man, I guess we'll make up for last week, but I guess affectionately for the remainder of the text, since we've had it come up again, started this with Jonestown CIA medical experiment where, hey, I just go to the DMV. I don't want to be Lauren no more. I'm going to be Shamika Harris. And we got it again. Abraham Bolden. We ain't going to be Abraham Bolden no more. We just scratch all that. You'll be Sean Harris. There we go. Wow. What does it mean to be white? And I bet they can still do that now, even in the real ID age. No problem. We'll never know Lauren existed. Shamika Harris. We'll compensate for last week. Let's see. Retired firefighter in Florida. Commentary to share.
Greetings, everyone. I did make it home safely. I have a few things from last week, very few things from last week that I wanted to report. First and foremost, I remember you stating to ask if anyone was around, meaning living and aware of the assassination. I was in the first grade at the time, 63, 64 school year. And what I recall about that time, Mr. White, our legendary principal at Frank C. Martin Elementary, let the school out, let us go home. You know, as a first grader, the only thing you think about is being happy that you're out of school early. And I came home, and I can recall my mother watching it on television, the reports on television. I do recall that, and I do recall it was the president of the United States at the time. That was my memory on that. I actually have been to the murder site at least 3 or 4 times. In college, we would play against Bishop College. You know, I was a college football player. We would play against Bishop College in Dallas, Texas. And the route to take to go to the college was right on the street where the assassination took place, and the bus driver would announce that when that take place. I actually had visited the same college that Mr. Abraham was a graduate of, Lincoln. We would play against them every year also. I started studying the assassination because I was always intrigued by it. All of the mystery, the so-called different thoughts on what actually took place. My mom actually bought that huge book of the Warren Commission, and I read parts of it, not the whole thing. It's a huge book that came out that was very popular. One thing about Mr. Fuller stated in the code book was one of the things that white people should perform and or do, and when they come in contact with non-white people, is to tell the truth. And that was something that was talked about in the book last week in the opening, when the Secret Service agent that had quote unquote befriended Mr. Abraham and basically told him about the test. He didn't pass the test, but it was another option for him to obtain the job, and he pursued it and became a Secret Service agent. I have here JFK was suave, smart, and he was coached by his father, Joe Kennedy, who was such a crook that FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, put JFK's dad in his cabinet because he thought the best place to put a crook is close to me, so I would know what he's doing. And he actually made him the ambassador to England, Joe Kennedy was. Up to this week, I heard about drinking and fraternizing with females, that sort of thing in the White House, white women, more than likely, in and around the area. I have here drinking while on duty is a serious offense and should be punishable for termination. Of course, that I don't think that happened. There was an incident where I think Mr. Abraham was issued a weapon that he wasn't trained on. That's a serious error to do so. I would just say that I don't know about back then, but but definitely today, if something like that happened, I would advise anybody not to carry on with something as dangerous as that. Being too sensitive, the phrase "being too sensitive," that's a very popular excuse given to non-white victims who are being mistreated in the workplace. I suspect Mr. Bolden was hired in order to investigate counterfeit crimes committed by Negroes, and he would go undercover to do so. It'd be kind of difficult for a white person to go through that. So that may have been a possible reasoning on why he was hired. Him and some others who were non-white people. And I got last two things here. The old hangman rope insult threat. We've heard that plenty of times. It still goes on today. Typical behavior by white co-workers to make a black victim's work life difficult and or impossible. That is very, very common. And that's all I have to say right now. Thanks for listening.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida, giving us his recollections from way back when it went down. If we, I guess, have any other folks who might have been around remember what happened when the assassination took place, let us know as we proceed through the text. Shamika Harris should be with us, *61. Other folks have commentary to share.
Have you heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak. This section, we only read one chapter. I had a lot of highlights, so it's kind of going to be hard for me to talk about everything that I thought was important. But I'll try to just talk about the most important things, I guess. At the beginning, and when it says in mid-July, the chief of the White House detail, James Rowley, asked me to report to the Treasury building for an exit interview. Okay, so he goes in there to talk to James Rowley, and he asked him the questions. And he asked him if he had any particular observations that he would like to make. I think he shared a lot of information, and I'm not sure if I would have told him that, and not just James Rowley. Lots of those people whom he shared all the observations he's made. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't have told anyone. I'm just saying, I think, well, like it's really hard to say, but if that was me and I was, if I had a government job, I wouldn't just tell everybody. I think I would be much more strategic about who I shared those observations with, and I would really only share them with someone who I thought was going to do something or would really understand what I was saying. But I don't think I would want to share it with a bunch of different white people who were going to disregard what I was saying, especially because it's kind of dangerous. Like, obviously JFK hadn't been killed yet, but after he gets killed, now everybody's looking at him because they know all the, steps that he was thinking because he told everyone. He tells them about the racism, the drinking, and the thing is, it's like he actually named the white agents who used the term nigger. Like, he named names, and I don't think he said, the drinking and partying by the agents on the Presidential Protection Detail were common knowledge throughout our agency. All right. So if it's common knowledge, that means lots of white people who have more power than he does are okay with it. I don't think like reporting it in that manner is going to solve the problem. I think it's just going to make white people angry with you. Let me see. When he tells SAIC, Harry Guyland and James Burke about what happened, the drinking and the racism, they seem to be angrier about the drinking than the racism. But I guess, drinking is definitely against the rules. Being a racist is not. He said, I personally think you're being too sensitive. They also said he was thin-skinned. And it goes right back to the skin with that. Hanley, when he gets back to Chicago, the guy Hanley, who's supposed to be running that office or whatnot, calling him his top agent and telling other agents either to ask for his input on their cases or to try to learn from his example. Now, this is a smart white man if he's the one who's in charge of the office. He has to know that's not going to help him out with those white agents. It's the kind of thing that's going to make those agents angry. So I don't really think he was trying to be helpful as far as Mr. Bolden goes. The other guy, Martineau, telling Abraham Bolden to give his reports to him, that's just, he starts giving him the reports even though it's against the rules. I don't know. I think I would have went to the other. Are you able to hear me clearly?
You had disappeared for like a brief, maybe 2 seconds, and then it popped back in where you were talking about him not giving the reports as it stipulates in the manual.
Okay. All right. So I think, I just would have went and talked to the white man in charge and asked him who he wanted me to give the reports to. I would have got some confirmation on that before I just started giving all the reports to a whole other person without asking the white man who's most in charge. Martineau, the things he said he was hogging cases and suggested that if he had some cases that were winding up, getting close to a successful conclusion, I could turn them over to agents in the office who weren't having the same kind of luck. When I flatly refused, he accused me of being too ambitious and uncompromising. So this white man was asking him to get cases, do almost all of the work, and when it was time to solve the case, to hand the case off to a white person who could go in and act like he had done all the work. That is, well, I was going to say it's absurd. It's racist, I guess. Let me see. When he gets offered the assignment, the IRS thing, and they say they could just erase his identity, wow, I would have been super nervous about that. He said my eagerness quickly turned to uneasiness. If they can actually do that, I thought, I'll never even be able to prove that I am who I really am. Something felt vaguely wrong about the whole proposition. Now, I don't, you guys know about more than this person than I do because I'd never even heard of him until we started reading the book. So I'm really wondering what happens. Because I keep wondering how he's going to end up in the crazy hospital, and if it has something to do with that. But that was really scary. I would not have took that assignment either. I also noticed that when he was saying what the assignment was, he said the initial assignment will be inside the Capitol building. There are very influential and well-connected employees in the Capitol building that are running skin games and loan sharking on other employees. I never heard that term skin game before, but when I Googled it, it said a rigged gambling game, a swindle, a swindling game or trick. I just thought to myself, it's kind of like what white people who practice racism, is that what they're doing? Like a swindling game or trick? I don't know. It does seem like they're tricking all the non-white people on the planet. At this point, it's not a game anymore, but you got to think the first time they tried it, it kind of was. And they must have thought, this really works. And they just kept doing it, and the rest is history. I don't know. That was just so weird. Skin game. Anyway, I didn't know what to make when he was walking by the White House and he saw the cloud over the second floor. He took that to mean it was really important to him. He said he was immediately overwhelmed by the conviction that what I had just seen was a vision. And, I wasn't sure what to make of it, but it did seem kind of important. And maybe it's one of those things where, hindsight is 20/20, and after something happens, then you remember all the things that happened before that. I don't know. I was wondering if he would have remembered that the same way if Kennedy never would have been killed. Let me see. The other black agent in the office was Conrad Cross. I guess maybe that's not important. The term cocksure was used. He was talking about, let me see. I told Kelly everything that I had seen and everything that had happened to me in Washington, and although he promised me that he'd look into it, I heard nothing from him or Chief Rowley prior to the assassination. The senior agent's cocksure attitudes governed right up to the moment of Kennedy's death. And I just thought cocksure is such an interesting term. I mean, for a male, it's like the ultimate confidence, the certainty in one's own performance, if you will. And also, it seemed important to me, I put that in the red highlight, it's that, when he was talking about the actual assassination. And it said, one of the younger agents riding in the car behind the presidential limousine heard what sounded to him like a rifle shot. He started to jump from the running board to assist the president, just as Agent Clint Hill had run to protect the First Lady. But the young agent was called back to the follow-up car by a more senior agent just as the third and fatal shot tore into the back of the president's skull. And I just couldn't, I didn't understand why they would call him back. I don't know. If you're really assisting the president and you're really there to protect him, it just makes it seem like they didn't want the president to be protected or assisted to call that junior agent back. And I don't know. Also made it seem like he wasn't in on whatever was going on. That's just what I thought. He said, by this time, my own disenchantment with the service was no secret. Beginning in January 1964, just after the assassination, orders started coming down from my supervisors that hinted at an effort to withhold or at least to color the truth. And I didn't know why he said it like that. Color the truth. What does that even mean? To make it not true? And I just didn't I don't know. Why is color associated with dishonesty and incorrectness in this manner? Let me see. The call at nighttime about John Hurd, they didn't know how to spell it. They had 5 alternate spellings, and, I don't know how you spell it, but I'm giving you the phonetic sound. Find out everything you can. And I get it. It sounds pretty important, but it's just how are you supposed to find a person when you really don't even know their name? It can be kind of difficult even when you do know their name. And to just get that phone call in the middle of the night is so random. And I don't know. I don't want to say it seems like the setup, but, what are you supposed to do? I mean, they did go look and everything, so I guess he did what he was supposed to do. The badges being taken and reissued. I just had so many highlights. I don't want to talk for forever. I guess he gets the noose in his office, and Martineau says someone's just joking around. Again, he says, don't be so thin-skinned. Everyone keeps minimizing the racism, and it seems like it sucks to be Abraham Bolden in this chapter. That's all I have for now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Shamika Harris.
Wait. I have one more question.
She has one more.
Mark Lane, is that the guy who wouldn't eat at Jonestown when everybody ate the meal? He just had the cough drops instead?
That would be Mark Lane.
Okay, thanks.
Who was pulled from the House Select Committee on Assassinations when Jonestown happened. Had to go to Guyana. Woo! One CIA event to another CIA event. Now remember, it was theorized when we read, was Jonestown a CIA medical experiment? Part of the reason this happened on November 18, 1978, Kennedy assassination on November 22nd, 1963. Part of the reason that it happened then was to disrupt what was happening at that hearing. People were paying attention, evidence come out, what's going on. It had only been 3 years. Jonestown happened. It had only been 3 years when the public was able to see the Zapruder film. What? And Jonestown happened 3 years later in the middle of the House Select Committee hearings on assassinations, on the King assassination, Kennedy assassination, all of that. And Mark Lane was going to testify, and then Jonestown happened. Whew. Anywho, let's see. Email number 1. This book is a welcome change from Dr. Angelo's works. Thank goodness. Mad Dog 2020. 2. I wasn't born when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, but I remember watching a documentary about it when I was young, maybe around 11 or 12. The images were so terrifying, aren't they? Oh, I had nightmares for a week, me too, after seeing Jacqueline Kennedy climbing on the back of the car trying to recover her husband's brain matter. It's broad daylight, you know? Years later, I watched the Oliver Stone movie JFK, which, like Bolden for Columbine, is probably very accurate. Well, I will say, hey, Oliver Stone got to stick his chest out a lot because that movie, that brought about the 90s review board, where they released a lot more information about what happened in the assassination, and he was kind of accurate with a lot of different things. Even the Secret Service, that's in JFK, that they had people claiming that they had Secret Service identification around the grassy knoll and other areas of Dallas. Now, what Mr. Bolden told us is important, the unprofessionalism, people lost their badges and all of that. What I think is the most important point about this is the white people said the only Secret Service agents in Dallas were on the motorcade, meaning they were on the vehicles with President Kennedy, Jacqueline Kennedy, Governor Connolly, LBJ. They were in the vehicles that were being shot at, as Shamika Harris said, diving on the car and protecting people or being held back, told not to do that. The white people said on the official record there were no Secret Service agents anywhere else in Dallas except on the motorcade. So anybody else who is saying, oh, I'm a Secret Service agent and I got a badge, whoa, who are you? Even if it is a real badge, who are you? You're not supposed to be here, not in official capacity. Who are you? What are you doing here? That didn't happen. Let's see, number 3. I'm pleased you selected this text, not because I had never heard of Mr. Bolden, and I'm intrigued about what his story will reveal about the period in time and JFK's assassination. 1963, what a year. 4. Mr. Bolden's entry into the FBI and Secret Service seems suspicious, as though he was pre-selected way before he had any actual encounters with JFK, and the encounters were part of the subterfuge. I said last week, because when they were telling him, like, hey, have you thought about any of our other programs? You know, they got language school in Chicago, and they already knew the name of it. Like, woo! Yes, they might have had their eyes on this. Now we can use this boy. Number 5. Being the first black person in a white environment is not an honor, nor is it being in a job that requires you to put your life at risk for a racist white supremacist. This week, Mia Love, first black female Republican Congresswoman, dead at 49. 6. Mr. Bolden made many assumptions about what white people were thinking and their intentions merely from observing their facial expressions and gestures. White people, master deceivers. 7. My biggest disappointment was the only racist I ran into were members within the Secret Service. Something tells me that wasn't true. Yeah, that would have to not be true. If he talked to any other white people, there would have had to be some other racists. 8. Mr. Bolden's exit interview was utter farce. He naively expected that Bowman would sanction the agents who racially terrorized him. The racist suspect had zero intention of doing anything about it, but I suspect Mr. Bolden left the room thinking otherwise. He seems, I almost want to say naive. Is that? I was going to say hopeful. Maybe I didn't want to say it because it sounds a little harsh. I want to say hopeful. Because he said fair. He said that I've heard him say that in interviews, that he thinks everybody is so-called fair-minded. I've heard him say that a number of times. Victims guaranteed qualified. I think he might have sincerely thought hey, these folks want to do the correct thing. They at least want to protect the president. I think that was his thinking, right? This is a white man. They'll at least want to do that. So let's get the drinking. Let's be, more professional. Maybe let's train with the firearm. Maybe that one we don't want to fake until we make it. And then let's clean up the nigger jokes. And maybe he put that last. He was like, man, they probably won't. Yeah. But he seemed hopeful, right? Idealistic, maybe. 9, sorry. No surprise that he wasn't trained properly. 10. Something like that should never happen. You should not have been given the gun unless you were qualified to use it. Was that attempted murder? That's a whole lot. What? I couldn't even imagine, because they said that was an assault rifle. What? What? We ain't been out to the range. What? You can injure yourself with that. If you don't, man, come on. 11. I wonder what your attitude would be if I had called Harvey a white honky fat pig. I shot back angrily. All we're saying is that you can't be too thin-skinned over these racial issues. For Burke, there was nothing left to discuss. Typical racist gaslighting and white people remaining on code, for sure. What would you have done if I'd called Harvey a racist? 12. Martineau would call me into his office and complain that I was hogging cases. He suggested that if I had cases winding down, turn them over to white people. Uppity Negro. Absolutely. 13. The agent explained I would be given another name and all official references to Abraham Bolden. There would, in fact, be no more records of an Abraham Bolden that could be traceable to you. My eagerness quickly turned to uneasiness, the gift of fear. Gavin de Becker. If they can actually do that, I thought, I'll never even be able to prove that I am who I really am. Reminds me of the Manchurian Candidate. I have to pause. Black male. He has a really peculiar name, but this time period, talking about things that are happening during this time period, I just played the clip at the beginning of Memorial Day about the black officer, Oakland, California. They frickin' used LSD on him in the Army. They made a whole movie about him. I'll get his name before we go off, but that was during this exact time period where white people were doing all those. That was Jonestown, a CIA medical experiment. That's during this time period where they're going out. Who I just mentioned, Alan Dulles, his brother, CIA, going out and doing experiments on non-white people, black people. Got to do studies and see what happened to them and all the rest of it. But that was all happening during this time period. And the Manchurian Candidate, that Black and White, the original, came out. That's this time period too. White people were talking about all that. Spies and espionage, and tricking people. Let's see. Number 14. Mr. Bolden seemed unaware of the danger around him, talking about white agents drinking on the job, not protecting the president, being responsible for the president being killed, etc. to other white agents was very risky. And she has very in all capital letters. I think Shamika Harris emphasized the same point. And again, I think, like I said, naive, but I'm like, idealistic, hopeful, like seeming like, hey, if I tell, the correct, powerful people in charge, white people will, hey, at least they'll protect the president. Wrong. We are not going to look out for this Negro lover. And some of this, dare I say, not understanding what it means to be white. All of us in that category for sure. Full of one time. Still learning. Now, let me see if I get in a few notes from this section. They put a noose up in the office. He used the metaphor saying that there was a Cold War between he and Martineau. The victims guaranteed qualified. This is a powerful race soldier who is probably a trained killer. This is not no so-called Cold War. He is just mistreating you. He probably put the noose up and then snickering about it. You call in and ask him for help on a legitimate job, doing correct things, stopping counterfeit, and nigger, get out of here, uppity nigger. Yeah. You should have turned that case over to a white man. We would have came out and helped call the news out, WGN. We'd have got our picture in the paper, Chicago Tribune, and everything. You want to be an uppity nigger? Do it yourself. Uppity nigger will sit around and tell racist jokes. Have some poison Kool-Aid waiting on you when you get back. And note, he said he couldn't go into the area in Chicago because it was a racially restricted region. Sound like the region where Dr. King went and they were throwing bricks and they had climbed in the trees and what have you. Dr. King didn't say Mississippi or Alabama was the worst. He said Chicago was the worst racism he experienced in life. They said they couldn't even investigate Echevarria because it seemed like he was running guns for the CIA. Who was not working for the CIA in some sort of nefarious activity? I'll never hear about CIA was out here handing out personal protective equipment, sanitized water, pistachios. It's always up to no good. That Doge, y'all gonna launch y'all downsize. Start right there. Let's see. They say, amazingly, they botched the surveillance on the Chicago plot and turned the radio on and allowed the assassins to escape. Ain't no whoops, but nah. It ain't no we just bungled our way all the way to nope. Some of you all are trained. You got this nigger out here who you didn't get trained with the gun and all that, but you white people, you are trained. I do not believe that you just bungled and we don't know. Oh, pause one again. What Lauren talked about, and he talked about Abraham Bolden, where he said the Secret Service agent was called back. They have video footage. You can see that happen in slow-mo. The agent, and this is like seconds before the shooting, the agent is going up to the car. He's going to ride on it. And you can see someone apparently tells him, come back. And the agent stops and he puts his hand up like, what? Are you sure? Now I'm doing the delivery, but you clearly see his arms go like, what? And instead of going on the car, he comes back, and within seconds, the shooting is on. If he had been there, maybe he gets killed. Maybe not. Let's see. They said beginning in January 1964, so this is barely 30 days, 45 days basically, after the assassination, he says, the orders started to come down from my supervisors that hinted at an effort to withhold or at least to color the truth. Now, I'm not sure if that's in the Word God. I know, sure, your true colors is in the Word God, and I know sometimes Mr. Fuller has like parentheses because this is kind of like that one, but that should not be used. That somehow suggests or equates color with deception. And really with this, if what we mean is white people are lying, they're being deceptive, and all of this is lying, even when you have information and we deliberately say we're not going to share, and I mean anything. We were at the Cognac Club and we were liquored up last night. What the Mad Dog 2020? We put it down. I can't find my drawers, much less my Secret Service identification. MD20. If that's the case, you just got to, hey, it don't get no more embarrassing. The president's brains are all over downtown. We embarrassed. So let's go ahead and correct things. And just fun fact, at this time, the Secret Service was under the Department of Treasury. I just find that fascinating. Like, this is an accounting detail. Now it's under the Department of Homeland Security, which sounds a lot more correct. But at this time, Abraham Bolden was working in the Department of Treasury, which means he might have been colleagues with Fuller, because I think the Bureau of Engraving and Printing is in the Department of Treasury, isn't it? Like, come on. Let's see. All of this indifference, agent, I don't care if he lives or dies when I go in, that was so widespread. There were so many white people. Apparently, this nigga loving Kennedy, like, and I'm not on that. Not all white people is racist. But this nigga loving Kennedy, and you trying to help Lumumba and Dr. King, you got something to say about nigga Medgar Evers and this March on Washington, you encouraged all this. I'm done with it. No, we're not following no orders, and no, we're not. I'm done with it. We going a new direction. Done with all this. The racism of this, not just with Mr. Bolden, but racism when white people get upset with other white people. They do not think you are following the racist code. Oh, man. There was a lot of that during this period. All over the world. They were going to kill the president in France for the same thing. I didn't even know this. Oh my God. They had a whole, let's talk about that another day. But woo, when white people get upset, you are not doing the right thing about racism. You can ride too, Whitey. Let's see. Uppity Negro. Rumors were flying about threats on the president's life. What in the... Now, just what I told you about this year, there's bombings and killings every day. Why wouldn't we be taking this seriously? We don't really care about this nigger lover. And you see this right here with Handy and Martino. Now, I'm certainly not going to pick neither one of them. Not all white people is just racist. No. But you do have white people who argue with racists who argue with each other. We have a different philosophy. Maybe we have a wildly different philosophy about how the plantation should be ran. And I might need to go upside your head about this, even if we are related. We're in the same white family. Oh, well, that happens frequently. Fuller talked, we get the nigger in between it. Go get Sam. Whack him upside the head and I get Sam to help me throw you out. That don't mean I'm not a racist. Let's see. Thin skin, love the metaphors. And he said he ran into 41 racists. 41 and only 41. Victims guaranteed on that, as I've seen 41 racists just if I step on the front porch for 30 seconds. I mean, come on. Any hoodles. Second audio segment, if you have additional commentary. I have to keep saying it because I don't know if it's in the book or not. James J. Rowley. He got that 500-acre training center, and he is in the crew, him and Kelly. Those are the two who got that Negro uppity. Hey, maybe that's part of the pit. That's what you get. You come in here talking about we drinking too much and unprofessional, and you don't think we cared about that Negro Kennedy. Well, see what happened. I bet you they don't have no reference nowhere on that 500-acre facility to know Abraham Bolden. I bet you that. Katherine Massey Book Club, audio segment number 2, The Echo from Dealey Plaza, Mr. Abraham Bolden. Still with us.
Chapter 7. My real troubles began in 1964. In May of that year, I flew to Washington for a long overdue stint at the Secret Service Training School. Previous attempts to attend had been canceled because of case assignments or court appearances, and since my bosses had generally rated me as an outstanding agent, nobody ever pressured me about it. But the time had come. Shortly after lunch on my first day of training school, the personnel director of the Secret Service, Howard Anderson, poked his head into the classroom and motioned to me and Gary McLeod, another Chicago agent, to come with him. "Bolden," Anderson said urgently, "I just got a call from Mr. Martineau in Chicago, and he wants you and McLeod to return to Chicago immediately." "What's it all about?" Gary asked. "I don't know all of the details yet. It has something to do with an investigation of a counterfeiting operation in Villa Park, Illinois. Mr. Martineau has sent for Agent Jordan out of Milwaukee, and he's trying to call in all the agents that he can," Anderson explained somewhat breathlessly. He went on to tell us that we needed to pack our stuff up from the classroom and head directly to the airport, where we were already booked on a flight back to Chicago that was leaving in an hour's time. Since there'd be no time to return to our hotel, other agents were on their way to collect our bags and belongings and would meet us at the airport. We had heard about Agent Anderson. Rumors around the service were that at one time he had been the agent in charge of the New York office, and that whether it was the pressure of that post or for some other reasons, he had suffered a nervous breakdown. Watching him twitch and perspire, his speech and movements nearly frantic as we drove to the airport, I found that easy to believe. It never occurred to me to wonder whether something else was agitating him, to ask myself if perhaps he knew more than he was saying. He said nothing else about the reason for our return to Chicago, except that he expected the investigation to be over quickly and that he looked forward to our coming back and completing the training in Washington. At the airport, Inspector Gerard McCann greeted us, carrying the bags he had retrieved from our hotel. Seeing how hastily he had jammed everything in, I took my bag and began to open it to straighten it out. McCann took the bag right out of my hand and said, "The plane is waiting for us on the runway." He also told us that he had paid our hotel bill, for which I reimbursed him on the spot. On board the jet, McCann led the way to our row of 3 seats. He sat at the window, and Agent McLeod stepped aside so I could sit in the middle. McLeod took the aisle seat. When Inspector McCann saw me hesitate for a second, he offered me his window seat. It suddenly dawned on me that these two men were not my traveling companions, but an escort. Some sort of deception was at work, and I sensed danger. I thought about my boyhood dream, and about being dead by the age of 30. I was 29. McCann and McLeod said virtually nothing and sat eerily still as we flew to Chicago, while I tried to put the pieces together. I couldn't imagine any reason they might need a black agent to help in an investigation in all-white Villa Park. I couldn't even think of any ongoing investigations in that community, much less one that would need me. Chicago was sweltering with temperatures in the high 90s when our plane hit the tarmac. Agent Richard A. Jordan, a well-respected but excitable young man whom I had known in Chicago before he became the special agent in charge of the Milwaukee office, was waiting for us as we disembarked. McLeod walked straight up to Jordan and demanded, "What the hell is going on?" Jordan seemed nervous. "We got this counterfeit plant located out in Villa Park. We need all the help we can get, so we had to call you guys out of school." "Are there any Negroes involved in that counterfeit operation in Villa Park?" I asked. "Yeah, Abe," said Jordan as he hurried us to a Secret Service car. "That doesn't make any sense to me. I didn't know Negroes lived in Villa Park. I can't see a Negro going to Villa Park to pass counterfeit money, because he would be too obvious." I didn't ask the other question on my mind. Why would Inspector McCann become involved with the Chicago counterfeiting case anyway? Inside the car, the heat had us all sweating freely. On the way into town, Agent Jordan stopped at a gas station to fill up the tank, and I took the opportunity to call my wife from a payphone. I hadn't even dialed half the number when Jordan hurried up from behind, his anxiety plain to see. "Who are you calling, Abe?" he shouted. "I'm calling my wife to let her know that I'm in town." "We don't have time for that. We have to get back to Chicago now. You can call her from there. Everybody else is all loaded up and ready to go, and you are holding us up." This just didn't sound like any counterfeiting investigation I had ever seen. Inside the car, I could hear Maurice Martineau's unmistakable voice coming over the two-way radio. "Have them wait in the U.S. Attorney's office," he was saying. The U.S. Attorney's office was on the same floor of the same building as the Chicago office of the Secret Service. Inspector McCann led me to the grand jury room and asked me to wait there. I had given testimony countless times in this room, but everything about that moment felt unfamiliar. The stillness of the empty chairs around the long mahogany table, the sweat-soaked shirt clinging to my skin, the gnawing in my stomach. I was overcome with weariness. "All I want to do is call my wife," I said to McCann, "and get something to eat. I haven't eaten since about 5 this morning, and that was only a cup of coffee and 2 donuts." It was now late in the afternoon. While McCann opened one of the windows in the stuffy room, I told him I was getting a drink of water. "You can wait a few minutes, can't you, Abe?" "I guess so," I replied, "but I can't see what's wrong with going to get a drink of water." "Well, we'll only be here a few minutes, and besides, if you leave the room, the informant might see you in the hallway," McCann said, referring to the alleged Villa Park investigation. As a general rule, an undercover agent would not be introduced or identified to the informant as an agent until the informant had been thoroughly debriefed and registered by the Secret Service. I asked if it would be all right to use the phone in the main office of the U.S. Attorney to call my wife. "No, Abe, Mr. Martineau will be here in a few minutes, and when he comes in, I don't want him to have to wait around for you." Something was very, very wrong. No undercover operation I'd been on, whether as a Pinkerton detective, a state police officer, or a Secret Service agent, needed this level of precaution. They weren't letting me eat. They weren't letting me drink. I couldn't even make a phone call. I understood that I was being held in that room against my will, and I couldn't contain myself any longer. "What's this Villa Park case all about?" I demanded. McCann walked over to the window and stood silhouetted against the light, a tidy government man in a neat gray suit. "I don't know what this is all about, Abe. I was told to come to Chicago just like you were. All I know is that Marty wanted me to stay here with you. That's all I can tell you at this time." "Well, hell," I fumed. "We've been here for over an hour now. It looks like Martineau isn't coming. Could you go get him? I'm tired and hungry and would like to call my wife." Of course, there was no Villa Park investigation. That was obvious to me now. I waited another hour in that stifling room with no food or water and no chance to use a phone. Martineau didn't arrive until after 6 p.m., and when he did, he was not alone. Accompanying him were Inspector Michael Turina and Edward Hanrahan, the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois. The three men sat across the table from me. Martineau, looking ruffled as if he had a long, hectic day, wore a slight smile on his face. He wasted no time on pleasantries, but just pointed a finger in my face and started shouting, "You've been trying to sell the file of the Spagnoli bond case." I hadn't known what to expect, but I certainly hadn't expected anything like this. "You can't be serious," I said. "That's ridiculous. We have a signed statement from Frank Jones naming you as the agent who he received a portion of the Spagnoli file from. Jones said that you sent him to Spagnoli's house and told him to try to get $50,000 for the whole file." "You can't be serious," I repeated. "Are you talking about the same Frank Jones I arrested twice in the past year for passing and making counterfeit money?" We had been dealing with Jones for some time, always plagued and frustrated by his constantly changing stories and excuses. His case had caused some friction in the office, especially between Martineau and me, but then again, there was always friction between the two of us. The Jones case was a ragtag operation so far as the quality of the counterfeit notes was concerned, but it was important in that it involved a close network of people who passed the counterfeit notes made by Jones, working primarily on the south side of Chicago. I remembered Jones very well. In early 1962, Chicago police detectives had caught a member of his gang passing counterfeit $5 bills and arrested him. I was assigned the case, and after interviewing the passer, convinced him to cooperate with the Secret Service. Hiram McCann became an informant for the Secret Service and gave information on other members of the counterfeiting ring. Jones's name came up as one of the main cogs in the scheme. Another person in the gang, a man called Slim, was thought to be a Negro pimp whose real name was Horace Foster. My information was that Foster worked with a very nice-looking lesbian called Princess when passing the counterfeit notes. After Jones's arrest and during his conversation with me on May 11, 1964, Jones also claimed to have known a Dago counterfeit plate maker also called Slim. I didn't believe Jones and didn't trust his information. Another counterfeiter named Arthur Rachel did use an alias of Slim, but I seriously doubted that was the same man. Based upon Hiram's information, I arrested several members of the counterfeiting ring while continuing to keep Jones under periodic surveillance. Finally, in the summer of 1962, I got a call from a tavern owner on the south side of Chicago who had been hit with 2 counterfeit $5 bills the night before. Immediately suspicious, the owner waited until the passer left, then went outside and copied down the license number of the car in which he drove away. I interviewed the tavern owner and checked out the license number. The car was traced to Frank William Jones. I arrested Jones and brought him into the office for an interview. Jones vehemently denied that he had intentionally passed counterfeit notes, claiming that his wife had cashed a check and probably received the bills from a currency exchange where she did business. I didn't believe Jones and presented the case to the United States Attorney's Office for prosecution. Prosecution of Jones was denied, however, on the basis that there was not enough evidence to sustain a successful prosecution for knowingly passing counterfeit documents. I was convinced that Jones was the leader of the counterfeiting ring, and when in early 1963 Jones was identified as the passer of another counterfeit $5 bill, the Secret Service raided Jones's home, working with SAIC John Hanley. We hit pay dirt. In the basement of Jones's home, we found the counterfeiting press, paper, and inks. There were fragments of counterfeit $5 bills jammed in the roller of the press. Knowing that conviction for a third felony could mean a life sentence without parole, Jones agreed to cooperate with the Secret Service in identifying other members of his gang who were passing the counterfeit notes. Over the next several months, Jones called me at the office and at my home offering information, but when I found that much of the information could not be verified, I suspected that Jones was taking me for a ride. I thought he might still be holding batches of counterfeit notes that he needed to unload. In order to test Jones, I sent a longtime informant with the Secret Service, Richard Walters, to Jones's home to attempt to buy any of the $5 bills that Jones might have hidden away. Knowing what I was dealing with, I filed meticulous reports of my encounters with Jones and discussed every move that I made with Hanley, the special agent in charge. When Jones called my home on the night of May 10, 1964, I refused to meet with him, explaining that I was going away to Secret Service school and would not have time to follow up on any new information that he might have. Jones was disappointed, and on the morning of May 11th, he called the Secret Service office and complained to Agent J. Lloyd Stocks that he had valuable information and that I had refused to meet with him. After being dressed down by ASAIC Martineau and threatened with termination if I did not meet with Jones as ordered, I met Jones in front of his home around noon. When Jones complained that some of his neighbors might see him seated in a detective car, I drove to Marquette Park, where Jones complained that I was going to send him to prison for the rest of his life. We had just arrested Joseph Spagnoli, Arthur Rachel, and several other members of a well-organized counterfeiting bond gang. During the conversation, Jones contended that he knew one of the people arrested by the name of Slim. During our conversation, Jones was leafing through a Phillips 66 fishing guide. On Saturday, May 9th, I had used the guide to note down, on the back cover, the address of both Joseph Spagnoli and Arthur Rachel. My assignment was to participate in the arrest of either Spagnoli or Rachel. I placed the fishing guide next to me on the front seat for quick reference, in case I had to go from one address to the other. When I saw Jones thumbing through the guide and making reference to Spagnoli, I took the guide from him, tore off the back cover, shredded the cover, and threw the pieces in a trash can in the park. I instructed Jones to do nothing about Slim or anyone else until I could discuss the matter with my superiors. Later that night, May 11th, Jones phoned me at my house and spoke vaguely about talking to someone about some suits. Jones asked me to meet him the next day and he would explain everything. I met Jones at a McDonald's restaurant on the afternoon of May 12th. Agent Conrad Cross was seated in the Secret Service car, as we had been working together during the morning. I stood outside the restaurant talking with Jones, who again said that he was in contact with Slim and was on to something that would help the Secret Service a whole lot. Jones was deliberately vague about the information, saying that he would give me more information only if I could promise that he wouldn't go to jail for the rest of his life. I told Jones that I would bring his cooperation to the attention of the prosecuting attorney, but could make no promises beyond that. I returned to the Secret Service office and dictated a report covering my contact with Jones over the past few days. Afterward, I went straight into Martineau's office. I explained in detail what had transpired between Jones and me, and the information that Jones professed to have in hand. "Close down the investigation and stay away from Jones," Martineau said, almost shouting. "He's just trying to get out from under his own case." The next morning, I went to work and telephoned Jones. I told him the investigation was over. Jones made no reply, and suddenly the dial tone hummed. Now, there in the grand jury room of the U.S. Attorney's office, Martineau confirmed that this was the man and the case in question. "When is the last time you saw Jones?" "You know that I saw Jones almost a week ago." I was feeling defensive and angry. "You know damn well that when I came to work on Monday morning, May 11th, Stocks called me into the office and told me that early that morning Jones had called the Secret Service and told him that he wanted to talk to me, but that I had refused to meet with him. I told Stocks then and there that I didn't have the time to fool with Jones and that I had 2 cases pending against him. You know all about it because when Stocks jumped up and went into your office and told you that I had refused to talk to Jones, you sent for me and chewed my ass out. You accused me of trying to run the show and pick and choose what I wanted to do. Now you're sitting here asking me when the last time I saw Jones was. It was all I could do to keep a lid on my rage. You and Stocks demanded that I see Jones, and you know it. You went to see Jones because you ordered me to go. When I got to Jones's house, he told me that he wanted to help us catch other counterfeiters and the Dago that helped him make the plates for his operation. The next day I came into the office and discussed the whole interview that I had with Jones with you, and you told me not to see Jones again. I haven't seen him since you told me not to, and now you're sitting here in front of these inspectors and the U.S. Attorney asking me when I saw Jones like you had no knowledge of what I was doing. I was too angry to be afraid at this point, or even to realize that there was any reason to be afraid. Martineau just sat there looking at me with that peculiar smirk on his face. None of the others spoke, nor met my eye. "Well, that's not what Jones said," Martineau responded. "Jones tells a different story altogether." "I don't give a damn about different stories Jones told," I shouted. "Jones told a different story when I arrested him for passing counterfeit $5 bills at the Tiger Lounge. Jones told a different story when Mr. Hanley and I went to his house and found the counterfeiting plant in the basement. Jones told a different story when he went around collecting money from people on the south side of Chicago, claiming to be working for Alderman Charles Chew. Jones was pocketing all of that money, and when Chew found out, he had him arrested. Jones has a case in state court right now for soliciting money under false pretenses, so don't tell me about any different story that Jones might be telling." I was almost winded from my diatribe. Nobody said a word. Some of them scribbled. Inspector McCann got up and paced. Martineau shuffled papers. "Wait a minute." Something occurred to me. "Am I under arrest? If I am under arrest, I request that I be granted the right to call my attorney right now." Hanrahan, the U.S. Attorney, visibly flinched but said nothing. "We do have a warrant that was issued at 2 p.m. today by Judge Campbell," Martineau said. "When we told him what we had, he got out of his sickbed and came to court and issued this warrant." "I don't give a damn about that. If I am under arrest, I want to be represented by an attorney, and that's that." Night was falling. The heat and the exhaustion were catching up to me, making it harder and harder for me to keep my composure, but the seriousness of the situation was coming into focus. "You know that I'm not guilty of the charges you're making," I said as calmly as I could. "I've been set up." The half-smile on Martineau's face convinced me that this was the moment he had been waiting for. His answer was a challenge. "Prove it." Martineau and his gang left me alone with Inspector McCann for a while. I managed to get a glass of water out of him, but not much else. When Martineau returned, he asked for permission to search my house. As calmly as I could, I told him that if I could call my lawyer, I'd let them search the house. I even offered to help, if that would help clear the matter up faster. Neither Martineau nor Hanrahan responded, and they abruptly left the room. A little while later, Agent Jordan returned and Inspector McCann walked me back to the Secret Service office. Jordan sat me down and began to grill me. "Who did you call when you were in Washington last night?" I called my wife. "You called the White House, didn't you, Abe? We have the records, and we know that you tried to call someone there. Who were you trying to contact?" "I don't think that's any of your business," I said curtly. When I arrived in Washington, D.C. on May 17th, Agent McLeod and I had walked to a small coffee shop and had sandwiches. On the way back to the Willard Hotel, where we were staying, I decided to call the White House switchboard. I needed to contact J. Lee Rankin, counsel for the Warren Commission, but I didn't know how. I needed to let some member of the commission know that I was interested in giving testimony as to my observations and complaints about past Secret Service agent conduct. Every agent in the Chicago office knew my feelings about the White House detail and that I believed its protection of President Kennedy was a complete sham. The detail was an unhealthy conglomeration of cocky senior agents, few of whom showed much respect for Kennedy, and inexperienced probationary agents and trainees who may or may not have fully understood the gravity of their assignment. Just as important, it was impossible to believe that anybody in the Secret Service could say with a straight face that nobody was out to get the president. We had seen far too much evidence to the contrary. The way I saw it, there were at least 3 factions in America actively trying to get at Kennedy. First, the organized Cuban émigré population based in Miami resented him for his ineffectiveness with Castro, and specifically for the complete fiasco at the Bay of Pigs. Second, mafia bosses across the country wanted Kennedy out of the way, believing that with JFK gone, Bobby's relentless pursuit of organized crime and corruption would end. The last group was the least organized, but perhaps the most numerous, the right-wingers and racists who couldn't abide his liberalism and intellectualism and who were outraged by his unequivocal commitment to equal rights for all Americans. There was little doubt that members of at least 2 of these groups had been following the president around the country, studying the rhythms and habits of his security detail in the hopes of finding weaknesses to exploit. Although the media had not reported the stories, attempts had been made to crash the Kennedy compound in Miami, and he had cut short a trip to Tampa because of a serious threat made on his life. After that, the focus shifted to Chicago and Echevarria. As for Dallas, I didn't believe we have, or will ever have, the full story. My opinion was that whoever was plotting the assassination trained their sights on Dallas once the Chicago attempt fell apart. I suspected that the responsible parties set up the agents on the president's protection detail by exploiting their reputed weaknesses for women and booze. Somehow, I theorized, they had managed to get the identification of one of those agents. I didn't believe that Oswald was a patsy, as some assassination researchers were claiming. There was evidence that made it likely that there were other assailants firing in Dealey Plaza that day who were probably unknown to Oswald, and that one of them fired the fatal shot from behind a fence in front of the presidential motorcade. I firmly believed that the officer who confronted the unknown suspect behind the picket fence immediately after the assassination was indeed shown an authentic Secret Service Commission book, the book that had been lost by, or taken from, an alcohol-impaired agent the night before. Further, I was convinced that the Secret Service leadership acted to conceal or at least obfuscate this fact by providing new commission books for all the agents in the service. The service has, of course, publicly denied this. Finally, it seems an inescapable conclusion that high officials in the U.S. government were, and perhaps some still are, well aware of the conspiracy or conspiracies that led to John Kennedy's assassination and have concealed or altered supporting evidence. In the final analysis, all that really mattered was that John Kennedy was gone. As the initial shock wore off, we all began to adjust to a new reality. Black Americans and others for whom the young president had represented so much hope felt the sting of his loss. So as McLeod and I walked along Pennsylvania Avenue on May 17th, I'd stopped at one of 2 conjoined telephone booths and told him that I was going to call my wife. As I dialed the White House switchboard, McLeod entered the booth next to mine. I quickly suspected his actions when I noticed that I never heard the ding of the coin drop normally heard when a coin was inserted into a pay telephone. McLeod was not making a telephone call at all. He had entered the booth to eavesdrop. I aborted the call, inserted another coin, and dialed the number to my home in Chicago. McLeod was silent in the booth next to mine. "I know that you've heard the old saying that loose lips sink ships," Inspector McCann added now. "We have to protect ourselves in the Secret Service. We have to know that we can trust the agents who are working for us and that when the chips are down, they will stick together as a team. What are you talking about? I demanded. I am a team player. What have I done to make you say that I'm not? Listen, Abe, McCann interrupted. Kennedy is dead. We did our best to protect him, and it didn't work out. We are not going to stand by and let you bury our careers and destroy the Secret Service. So that's what this is about? Is that why I'm here? What have I done to destroy the Secret Service? McCann mopped his sweaty brow. As I said, loose lips sink ships. That's the bottom line. Agent Jordan tried a different tack. Abe, would you answer a few questions for me on the polygraph machine? Martineau asked me to give you a test and take a lie detector test? About what? About some of the things Jones and Spagnoli said. It might help us clear up some of what Jones is saying. Jordan, I protested, you above all know that polygraph examinations aren't reliable. They aren't permitted in a court because too much depends on the attitude of the polygraph operator. As far as I can see, you guys have already got a warrant for my arrest and believe that there is some truth to what Jones is saying. Jones will say anything that he is told to say in order to get out from under the case I have against him. No, I don't think I will take the test unless I have a chance to clear it with my attorney. Abe, you're still an agent, and we can order you to take the test, said McCann. You can order me, but I don't have to follow your order. Then we'll just fire you right now for insubordination and serve the warrant. We're not going to fuck around with you any longer. There didn't seem to be any way out of this one. Okay, I'll take a polygraph test, but I won't take it if Jordan is going to give it to me. He's been lying to me all day, and I think that some impartial administrator, such as someone from John Reed and Associates over on Michigan Avenue, should give the test. That's who the Chicago police use to examine their officers. We don't have time for that, Abe, Jordan said impatiently. We need to get this done now. I'm just following orders and doing what I am told. I don't know whether or not there is anything to these accusations against you. I'm just doing what Marty and Tarina tell me to do. I'm sorry that I lied to you, but I was just following orders. Okay, I'll take the test, but I'm not answering any questions about anything except the accusations. I want you to be clear on that.
And we will pick up for the polygraph examination on next Friday. Katherine, Massey, Book Club, Context of White Supremacy. Still be in Chapter 7 for next week. Number to dial, 605-313-5164. The code, 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email, untiljustice@gmail.com. Let's see, I'll get in one email and then we will get to it. Let's see. Email number 2. Greetings, Gus, listeners, callers. I have one text in my personal library, Case Closed, Lee Harvey Oswald and the Assassination of JFK by Gerald Posner, published in 1993. I think I got through half of it when I bought it. I think I have been burned out on the Kennedy assassination for a number of years. Reading this text has gotten me interested again. Dr. Harry Woods, sociologist, professor, activist for black athletes, was born and raised in East St. Louis, guest on the Cows in 2010. Chapter 6. There were a couple of incidents where the word nigger was used in my presence. I think you took the right course of action. Bowman said you can bet that I will look into that matter and discuss it. Look into it. That's the problem. They should be fired for committing the crime of racism, white supremacy, for sure. That should be in the handbook. 2. Training I had received during the 30-day stay was inadequate. Handed me an AR-15 automatic weapon. When I told him I didn't know how to operate the weapon, the agent just smiled and said, "Fake it Classic example of workplace racism, lack of training. This text makes one think twice before recommending careers in law enforcement for non-white victims. Being around a bunch of race soldiers with legal firearms. See C.O.W.S broadcast American Gun, the true story of the AR-15, Cameron McWhirter, Zusha Ellinson, Jonestown, mentioned in that book. Number 3, too much drinking of alcohol by the agents guarding the president. 2 of the agents were high, in my opinion. The chief took a small notebook out of his desk drawer. And who were the agents? He wrote down the names as I spoke them, as if he, the chief, wasn't aware. He said this was widespread. Everybody knew, so it can't be like, what? Drink? Really? I never. Come on. 4, you can't be too thin-skinned. Now you take your other Negro agent in New York. He's not offended by those kind of words. As a matter of fact, I heard him use the word Negro all the time. You talking about Cat William? Maybe? No. Having a better understanding of racism, white supremacy helps non-white victims to expect this type of mistreatment and thus improves our ability to handle such situations unemotionally. Very important to be unemotional in the response. 5, the manual was clear on this point. Knowing the manual will not necessarily protect you in every situation, but you are better off knowing it thoroughly than not. At my job, the policy manual is only online and very difficult to find. That's like the Kennedy information. We redact that. I think it allows suspected racists to change it easily without employees being aware. 6, throughout the service, rumors were flying about threats on the president's life. Reports had circulated in the agency about Cuban dissidents and right-wing. See that right? See that was like racist. Right wing. What? Chicken wing? What's going on? Who were stalking him and plotting his assassination. This book was published in 2008. Even though he may not have had direct knowledge, should he have also mentioned the theories regarding the role of the mafia and Hoover's animus towards the Kennedys? Well, I guess he did mention the mafia just now, so that's, you just got that in the section we read. Hoover, I don't know. Maybe we'll get to it. 7, I closed each eye in turn, again checking my vision, but the cloud remained, covering only the upper floors of the White House. I can't say why exactly, but I was immediately overwhelmed by the conviction that what I had just seen was a vision, and that this vision had meaning. Not sure what I make of his talk about dreams and visions in this text. The haints could be. I was thinking, man, Gavin DeBecker, the gift of fear. And I say that because this is not, I'm just looking at the tea leaves. I'm sitting here seeing these reports coming in. Threat in Chicago. Rifleman caught, bumbled, searched. We let him go. Threats in Florida. Had to change this. Like, man, if I'm hearing this every day, anything might look, is something. 6, Conrad Cross took it no more seriously than he had my previous observations about the inept protection provided by the White House detail. He had the same kind of cavalier attitude as the Washington agents, contributing to my growing certainty that the Kennedys' days were numbers. I said the Kennedys. Man, I'm jumping way far ahead. That Kennedy's days were numbered. There are no allies on the plantation. Considered second black Secret Service agent in an interview, he claims that he was on the Dallas detail when Kennedy was assassinated and told him it was against protocol to have an open limo, but Kennedy insisted. See Facebook post, The Father's House Church, February 9, 2020. Now, there are reports Kennedy he was there. This was a political trip. Election was coming up in 1964, presidential election. He was there, woo voters and all that good stuff, helped the Democratic Party in Texas. And so he wanted to be friendly and affable. You see a video of him at the airport that morning, Love Field, shaking hands with the crowd and all that. So that is reported. However, there were lots of errors. You heard that with the Secret Service agent being called back. There are speed requirements. They have codes about everything. If you're not going to have the hood on the car, which many people had insisted about, if we're not going to do that, at least we need to be going a certain speed. We can't be going by all these windows, tall buildings where windows are up and all that. Like, it would have to be a lot more than just, hey, we're going to have a good time and go out like everything is everything. And they just killed Medgar Evers. They just bombed that church. I mean, come on. 9, I told anyone who would listen that I didn't believe the agents on the White House detail would act swiftly or appropriately to stop an attempt on the president's life. So you told the suspected racist who made nigger jokes. if you do not understand racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works, everything else, everything you think you understand will only confuse you, for sure. Kelly had interviewed Lee Harvey Oswald, who mentioned the name John Hurt. I found online that Oswald called the person named John Hurt. Not sure if this is the same person. See what JFK files revealed about Oswald's connection to Raleigh, WUNC, Charlie Shelton, Frank Stasio. See some of this information still coming out and all that good stuff. And again, now Kelly is along with John J. Rowley. These are two of the white men who allegedly got that Negro. 11. Newspapers reported the presence of an unidentified man in the area known as the Grassy Knoll in Dealey Plaza. Add to this the book Depository, Zapruder film, which nobody saw for 12 years, Second Gunman, Jackie Kennedy and LBJ on the plane taking the oath of office, John saluting the casket. Words and images have become so recognized in the public conscious, particularly among those who lived through it. With each book, movie, documentary, document dump, it never seems if we come closer to the truth of the matter as intended. Obfuscation. 12. They botched the surveillance and lost the suspects. On purpose? That's what I said. Like, it's too much. Whoops. Ooh. I mean, really. We're at minimum, that many whoopses, you should have been fired, right? 13. Anti-Castro Cuban Homer Escavera. It seems that he may have had connections to Oswald, never adequately investigated and evidence probably destroyed. There was so much evidence destruction. Woo! That probably will come out here, but Jesus Christ. Because white people fought so hard, all the way, including Lyndon Johnson. Once he became president, they fought so hard to not have a hearing. Now, even that. The president gets killed in broad daylight in front of a crowd. Oswald gets killed, so, not going to be a hearing. What? What do you mean it's not going to, we're not going to just, hey, we just got to move on, And so, since for weeks, months, it was, we're not going to have a hearing. It's not like they immediately came out and said we're going to have a Warren Commission. Since that was the case, you had the FBI, I think, military immediately just started the document shredding, which we had already heard is just thousands of pages. That's what we heard in North Carolina talking when it was Nelson Johnson. Same thing, COINTELPRO, and we tried to set this nigger up and assassinate him, shred all that. Same thing here, where they had weeks, months to shred. I mean, this is open record, has been for years. Military had lots of shredded all that. FBI shredded, get rid of. Same thing you heard in the book. Secrets like get rid of. Conceal, obfuscate. Same thing. All of that is willful deception. You do not want transparency and let everybody see. Like I said, hey, it can't get worse than what happened. The president's brains, white man's gray matter is in the road. How much worse could it be? Let's see. 14. Warren Commission. My parents bought a copy of the official federal government text of this commission, which was published in 1964. I tried reading it but lost interest because it's goofy and deceitful. Maybe I was too young to understand it. It concluded that there was no conspiracy and Oswald acted alone. It's goofy. And look, man, I totally forgot that volume, I think, is not indexed. It would be the same thing like what they said with the PDF dump now. It's not searchable. And it's also thousands of pages. Minimize, obfuscate, and omit. Moo. 16. Looking up, I saw I tied to the ceiling light above me a rope, a hangsman noose. Don't be too thin-skinned, Martineau answered, as if he had never heard before, as if I'd never heard that before. They're just having fun with you. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. How many times have we heard similar events in the Cows Neutralizing Workplace Racism broadcast dismiss a criminal act with a metaphor? They love them metaphors. Chapter 7. Edward Hanrahan, the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, directed in conjunction with the FBI, who were handlers for the informant William O'Neill, who was a teenager when he was recruited by the FBI, the assassination of Fred Hampton, indicted for obstruction of justice and conspiracy for false evidence. He was acquitted. They do allege that raid basically ended his career, but that is astounding to me that you got the same white dude, Democrat, supposed to be a friend of the Negro. You were involved in the murder of Fred Hampton and Mark Clark and try and blame it on William O'Neill. And you're involved in setting up and lying on Abraham Bolden, which kind of means you are at least tangentially involved in this assassination thing, because a lot of that is lying and obfuscating. What a career, Mr. Hanrahan. 2. Dago counterfeit plate maker, also called Slim Dago, originated as the word Diego for a Spanish white person. It has come to represent a pejorative for a Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian white person. I always thought it was just associated with Italians. 3. I don't give a damn about that. If I'm under arrest, I want to be represented by an attorney, and that's that. Intelligent. 4. You called the White House, didn't you, Abe? I decided to call the White House switchboard. I needed to contact J. Lee Rankin, counsel for the Warren Commission, but I didn't know how. Maybe he should have tried to do a deep throat type operation like the FBI agent did with Woodard and Bernstein, where they were Washington Post reporters, maybe with a black newspaper. I don't know. They probably had him under surveillance, and I don't know. Number 5. The way I saw it, there was at least 3 factions in America that actively were trying to get at Kennedy. Cuban immigrant population based in Miami resented him for his ineffectiveness with Castro, fiasco at the Bay of Pigs. Second, the mafia, Bobby's relentless pursuit of organized crime and corruption, right-wingers, and racist. And now the latest theory after the release by Trump of the JFK documents, the Israelis, because Kennedy did not want them to get a nuclear weapon. Israel is the only country in the Middle East which has a nuclear weapon. All of that, Cuban immigrant population, racists, mafia, all of these, one, would be people classified as white. Now that's the big. You might just be talking about one big group of people. Variety of interests, but you are kind of talking, I mean for reals, the racists and the mob. Like, now how much of a line is there between the two? The Cuban, so now you're just talking about racists who speak Spanish, maybe? And the Israeli component, now you're just talking about racists who, Hebrew, what have you. That's what we're talking about. They do Hanukkah, maybe, but they still practice racism and white supremacy. So I think what I said, I don't disaggregate with white people. CIA, and some of these folks, maybe I'm a racist and I'm in the CIA. You see? Maybe I'm a mobster and I'm in the CIA. These folks might be, wherever they happen to be business. And people say that, maybe the people who do this, I'm into the defense industry or wherever I am in this nexus, but we all have the same thing. This nigger lover has really gotten on our nerves. Deuces. And we just go about, and wherever you fit in, you could even fit in on the other side. You don't even have to know all of this. I don't like that nigger lover, so I maybe just participate in the after part. I participate in getting rid of Abraham Bolden. We get rid of trash. Get rid of. Don't ask no, I'm just following orders. Get rid of, right? Let's see. 6, I didn't believe that Oswald was a patsy. There were other assailants firing in Dealey Plaza. How does he know this? Well, the House Select Committee on Assassinations in the 1970s, and I believe this is the one that Mark Lane testified at, those white people, I think there were some black people on that committee too, but basically those white people, they concluded it was more than one shooter. They concluded somebody was firing from. Now, regardless, if you just say it's more than one shooter, conspiracy, and that's over, and for me, if it's more than one shooter, that's gigantic conspiracy, because why do you have all these white people lying after the fact? If it's more than one shooter, then just say that. And dang, the world is a dangerous place. Who did this? Go, you got shooters on the go. You shake me down if I steal an extra chicken nugget from Hardee's. You killed a white man in broad daylight. Go get to it, man. Why do you have police? Why you got all these nukes and stuff, man? No. But that is like, and see, that's another part of it. See, now, why do you go and do all these investigations and publish all this information and things? And we're white. That's the same thing with Dr. King. They had that civil trial in the 90s where white people concluded, dang, it seems like there probably was a conspiracy to kill Dr. King. That didn't get put in the newspaper. Nobody talked about it. Shh. That did. I mean, that's congressional inquiry
all that. They looked at the evidence and everything. Our conclusion, it was more than one shooter. They didn't investigate. They didn't reopen. That you got a killer on the loose, right? Yeah. All righty. Let's see. 7, take a lie detector test. About what? You, above all, know what polygraph examinations aren't reliable. They aren't permitted in court because too much depends on the attitude of the polygraph operator. The author's years of training prior to joining the Secret Service, Pinkerton State Police seems valuable, particularly since he thought this training with the Secret Service was inadequate. Learn everything you can in the global system of white supremacy racism. Absolutely. One thing I will say, that portion where they say, let us search your house. You don't have nothing or what have you. Let us go search. He said, no problem. You can let me. I'll go help you do it. Just let it. Victims guaranteed, qualified. That's what I said. It seems, I almost want to say naive, but hopeful, idealistic. And this comes up on neutralizing workplace racism all the time. I don't care what you have been accused of. You robbed Fort Knox. You stole the weed whacker. You stole the paperclip. I don't care what it is. Unless you have a warrant, I do not consent to searches of my person, property, phone, vehicle, house. Produce a warrant. Until then, thank you. No, thank you. You got to be joking. I've heard that from people say, oh, I don't have nothing to private. What? What? Norm Stamper said that. That's a white man who used to brag about carrying a nigger knocker, and I'll put you to sleep, and all that. Wrote a whole book about it and everything. Bigger and blacker, the boy, I'll nigger knock you out, boy. He said, no. Put it in all capital letters, bold face type. Do not consent to a search of your person, property, phone, house without a warrant. That's former captain of the Seattle Police Department. He explained it on the C.O.W.S, 2016. You do not consent to and I mean, I would Secret Service, FBI, get a warrant. CIA, get a warrant. Get a warrant. That's why we got the Constitution. Y'all talk all that democracy and all the rest of it. Get a warrant. Go talk to Hanrahan. Y'all can make all that up and raid and storm in at 3 o'clock in the morning. You all know how to do so. Get the warrant. Let's see. Folks who dialed in, if you have a commentary to share, *61. Let's see. Folks who got discombobulated with my switchboard reading the emails here. Let's see. Shamika Harris, retired firefighter. If you'll have commentary, proceed.
May I be heard?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. For that second part right there, hey, well, you know what? Before I get started talking about the book, you were talking about the Secret Service being part of the Department of Treasury. So that kind of makes sense because last week when I was reading, anyway, it seems like the Pinkerton Agency was a sort of precursor to the Secret Service, and those Pinkertons used to like solve crimes like train robbery, like they solved money crimes. So it kind of makes sense that that will fall under the Department of Treasury. That was my thought on that. As far as this section right here that we just heard, it said, at the airport, Inspector Gerard McCann greeted us carrying the bags he had retrieved from our hotel. Seeing how hastily he had jammed everything in, I took my bag and began to open it and to straighten it out. McCann took the bag right out of my hand and said, the plane is waiting for us on the runway. He also told us that he had paid our hotel bill, for which I reimbursed him on the spot. Okay. This person unpacked his bag and then pressured him not to look on it. That just would have made me really nervous. There's no telling what's in that bag. That's one of the questions they'll ask you at the airport. If you get any extra questioning, it's, did you pack your own bags? And, you know, I know 9/11 hadn't happened yet, so they didn't have all those screening procedures, but really, he had no idea what was in that bag. It could have been a bomb. Also, he repaid this person for paying his hotel bill. The government is supposed to pay for your room. Your job is supposed to pay for your room when you're doing training. That's work. You shouldn't have to pay for that at all. Then he's trying to make the call. They say, who are you calling, Abe? He said, I'm calling my wife to let her know that I'm in town. And he's like, we don't have time for that. We have to get back to Chicago now. You could call her from there. Everybody else is all loaded up and ready to go, and you're holding us up. And there's this constant rushing, right? He was rushed. He wasn't allowed to look in the bag. He's rushed. He can't call his wife. You know, I can't get a drink of water. I can't do this. I can't do that. And that urgency, they're trying to make him feel we've got to do it now. You know, it's like when people call you on the phone and try to scam you into paying something or giving your personal information. That's like a typical pressure tactic to make it seem like there's no time to waste. It has to happen now. And that rushed feeling interferes with a person's ability to think in a logical manner. I don't know, I highlighted other parts where he's trying to call his wife, he's trying to get the water, things like that. They weren't letting him eat, they weren't letting him drink, he couldn't make the phone call. And it took him a while, right, before he noticed that he's being held in that room against his will. And, and right at the beginning of the chapter, right, he said, my real troubles began in 1964. In May of that year, I flew to Washington for a long overdue stint at the Secret Service training school. Previous attempts to attend had been canceled because of case assignments or court appearances. And since my bosses had generally rated me as an outstanding agent, nobody ever pressured me about it. See, I think he might be thinking about this in an incorrect manner. It wasn't like perhaps, it wasn't that they weren't pressuring him about it. Maybe they didn't want him to go to the Secret Service school. He thought he was doing well, but I don't think these white people really liked him, and maybe they didn't want him to get that sort of education, get that sort of training. And maybe if he had already completed the Secret Service training school, he would have noticed some of these things were unusual before he did, because it seemed like it took him a long time. I don't know. It seemed like he trusted these white people a lot. It was kind of weird. And then there was another part. It said another person in the gang, a man called Slim, was thought to be a Negro pimp whose real name was Horace Foster. Now, that's what the text says, but the book, like Negro pimp is two different words, but the audio book made it seem like that was one word, Negro pimp, and it was just weird. I don't know if anyone else noticed that Negro pimp was one word in the audio book. They talked about Jones and, how he got a call from a tavern owner after he'd been hit with 2 counterfeit $5 bills. He goes outside, waits until the guy who passes the money left, and then he writes down the license plate number, and it's Frank William Jones. He said he arrested Jones and brought him into the office for an interview. And then prosecution of Jones was denied, however, on the basis that there was not enough evidence to sustain a successful prosecution for knowingly passing counterfeit documents. I'm like, oh, Jones must be a white man. And I noticed that several times in this text. This isn't the first time. Like, he doesn't make it obvious. He doesn't make it plain. What is a person's racial classification? If you're describing someone, if you're talking about someone, are they white or non-white? That's pretty important information. He said, over the next several months, Jones called me at the office and at my home offering information. But when I found out that much of the information cannot be verified, I suspected that Jones was taking me for a ride. Why would this suspect have the phone number of his residence? That's crazy. And also, it says, when Jones called my home on the night of May 10th, 1964, I refused to meet with him, explaining that I was going away to Secret Service school and would not have time to follow up on any new information that he might have. Again, I don't understand why he gives people so much information. This is a criminal. Why would he tell Jones that he was going to Secret Service school? Also, why did he tell Martineau about the exact assignment that he had been offered by the IRS? Like, it was supposed to be undercover. It's just, for a Secret Service agent, it seems like he talks a lot. It's like he's not keeping secrets, and that's like right in the title. Let me see. Also, I want to talk about Martineau and how angry he would get whenever it seemed like Mr. Morgan was trying to choose what he was going to do instead of white people just doing what white people told him to do. Like he gets accused of trying to run the show and pick and choose what he wants to do. And like after he said he wasn't going to take that assignment for the IRS, he just got so mad, so angry. He's screaming, yelling, "You don't get to choose what you want to do." It's not funny, but it kind of made me, I don't know. It made me like when black basketball players, when they decide they're going to go to another team, play for another city or something like that, the way white people get so angry, that's what it made me think about. Let me see. He said, every agent in the Chicago office knew my feelings about the White House detail and that I believed its protection of President Kennedy was a complete sham. See, that's not something every agent in the Chicago office should know. It's just dangerous for him. Okay. And I guess the last line of the text this week, he said, "Okay, I'll take the test, but I'm not answering any questions about anything except the accusations. I want you to be clear on that." Number one, I wouldn't have said yes to the house search. Number two, I wouldn't have said yes to this polygraph test. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it said, "Abe, you're still an agent and we can order you to take the test." And he said, "You can order me, but I don't have to follow your order." He said, "Fine, we'll just fire you right now for insubordination and serve the warrant." That right there means they already got a warrant. He said, "We're not going to fuck around with you any longer." And then he's like, "Okay, I'll take the polygraph test, but I won't if Jordan is going to give it to me." And it's just like, I don't know, man. If they're willing to set Mr. Morgan up for this crime, I think his employment might already be moot, gone. He just doesn't realize it yet. He should have called the lawyer right then. None of that cooperation. I don't think that was in his benefit at all. And that's all I have for right now. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Much obliged, Shamika Harris. Let's see, retired firefighter in Florida. Did you have commentary, Mr. Abraham Bolden's The Echo from Dealey Plaza, retired firefighter? Did you have commentary?
Yeah, yes. The first alert that I got in the second half was when I heard the name Ed Hanrahan, and my memory went to this was the first one of the people who was instrumental in killing Fred Hampton, and then I looked on Wikipedia and found out that he was born in Miami, Florida, in an area called Coconut Grove, where the white supremacists created a east side and a west side. The west side, away from water, was where the non-white people, rich, classified as black, were allowed to stay at. He basically went against counter-racist codification on a lot of occasions with the assumptions that his observations of incorrect things going on his job, that white people, and complaining to white people that they were going to effectively do something about it, not understanding that actually what they were going to do is turn on him. And the book read is getting to that, and how they strategically have go about the means to what I think is going to end up with him being in prison and that's basically my report. Thank you.
Much obliged, retired firefighter in Florida. Let's see if I have any thoughts to get in. Platter, we talked about Fred Hampton many, many times. COINTELPRO, same time period, 1960s, same people. COINTELPRO, that's why Dr. Welsing said Fred Hampton, Ed Hanrahan mentioning racial matters. Dr. Kenneth O'Reilly, 3-time guest on the Cows, mentioned his book twice. He's already been mentioned twice. Then reading all of this in 2 of his different books, Nixon's Piano, where he talks about Kennedy's eventual successor, Nixon, and who Kennedy bested in the 1960 presidential election. But he talks about how all of the U.S. presidents aid and abet in the system of white supremacy racism, including President Kennedy. And some of that comes to COINTELPRO and all that he allowed with the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, and them to stampede and eavesdrop and everything else with SNCC and Dr. King and Minister Malcolm X and on and on and on. Fannie Lou Hamer, Rosa Parks, Ella Baker, blah, blah, blah. Let's see. Oh, and he sensed that I had forgot about that. He had the premonition that he was going to die at a young age, and then all this happens. White people are so deceptive. They just lie all the time, and he doesn't even know what's happening until way late in all of this. They just lie. Us sitting around waiting all these years later to know what they're going to say about the Kennedy. Who finally they just lie and conceal and deceive, master deceivers in so many ways. Mr. Bolden is saying, man, let me call my wife. I haven't gotten anything to eat. I haven't had anything but a cup of coffee and 2 donuts. Jesus Christ. Is that Nutricide? My goodness. If breakfast is the most important meal of the day, please don't let it be 2 donuts or even 1 donut or even a half a donut. Let's see. They use a black felon to discredit Mr. Bolden, and all of that stood out. Like, this is a 2-time convicted felon who might be facing a life sentence, and even I paused and thought on all of it. This is not only a nigger, an uppity nigger, a cheeky nigger. He gonna tell us what assignments he's not gonna do. We got our other lazy, hungover white agents. They made no arrests, ain't met their quota, and you don't want to help our lazy, shiftless, drunk white agents out and give them your cases after you've done all the hard work, and then you don't want to do these assignments when we try to get rid of you, and then you are Kennedy's nigger boy. Kennedy up here, and this my nigger I want to put on the Secret Service and send to language school and whatever other plans we got. You Kennedy, that nigger lover, you that nigger lover's nigger boy. That alone, they kill you too. Maybe that's what they had in store for him with that whole undercover thing, but whatever, we'll kill you too. And if we're not gonna kill you, and then I forgot, and then you acting like you want to go and snitch on us and talk about y'all didn't protect, you didn't do right, y'all weren't following the code, and y'all were drunk and lost your ID badge and all the rest of it. And whoa. You uppity and you gonna snitch on us? That's what they call it too. You a uppity nigger and you gonna snitch on us? Lucky we didn't kill you too. Real talk. Maybe that's what they had planned. Let's see. They say speed him up, rush him so you can't think, and then make it all hot, can't have any water, he's dehydrated. All of that is deliberate. See, we make you wait all day long, you can't contact nobody, all that deliberate. Same thing they do, Khalif Browder, let's see. And then he said, I did struggle because it was so hot, it made it hard for me to maintain my composure. That's our C word. We say that all the time on Neutralizing Workplace Racism. Composure. And white people deliberately do things to provoke you, make you respond with emotion and not logic. Let's see. And then he's saying he wants to try to give testimony to the Warren Commission. What? There is evidence that the CIA, whites at the CIA, were actively vetting what information even got to the Warren Commission. And do you know who was on the Warren Commission? Do you know who was on the Warren Commission? Alan Dulles, the same Alan Dulles that John Kennedy fired from the CIA? Yes, the same Alan Dulles that John Kennedy fired from the CIA. And that would also be the same John Dulles that we think participated in the assassination of Patrice Lumumba? Yes, the same Alan Dulles. Even you think about that. If you were working at McDonald's making chicken nuggets and you got fired, and then your boss who fired you, they got killed mysteriously, and they're going to have an investigation to figure out what happened, and they come say, we're going to put you on the panel. Say, wait a minute, didn't you get fired from chicken nuggets? I'm going to be objective. We didn't, bygones be bad. That happened a long time. I'm not even... What? Do what? Anyway, recuse, isn't that a word? Like conflict of interest, don't they say that? Anyway, already said the three factions that he mentions that wanted to kill Kennedy. That's why I said I don't disaggregate whites. And do you think the mafia people would be racist? Like, so when I watch The Godfather, do these people look like they would be racist? That's the same time period, right? When I watch The Godfather, do these people look like they would be racist? That's what I mean. Like, I don't really see like a clean, these are three distinct groups. You are just talking about what could be one gigantic nexus of racists. This nigger lover got to go. Powerful racists, I might add. Alan Dulles, like, would be in that number, right? Like, let's see. He says, finally, it seems an inescapable conclusion that high officials in the U.S. government were, and perhaps some still are, well aware of the conspiracy or conspiracies that led to John Kennedy's assassination and have concealed or altered supporting evidence. That is the type of thing that gave me nightmares and will keep you up at night, at least for me. This is the white president. He was killed in broad daylight in front of a crowd under suspicious circumstances. White people concluded multiple people did this and nothing. No investigation. We're not trying to find nobody. Pfft, that's old hat. We're done. Moving on. Trump is in the White House now. We got other problems. What? Like, what? If this can happen to the white president, what does my life mean as a victim of white supremacy? Abraham Bolden. You go get a not once, twice. He about to be a 3-time felon. And that's all you need. I'm up the river for life. I arrested this dude twice. Shut up. Lose sleep. Like, wow, things are way worse than I thought. And you got, that's what, even that, like, what do you mean? It's like he's saying this unequivocally. It is inescapable that very powerful white people know we have been lied to about what happened here and whatever. They have lied, covered it up. That's why I said, like, this would have to be a CIA event. What could possibly be? This is what happened, but we don't want to pursue. We don't even want to tell the truth about it. We prefer to lie as even opposed to going to, track down who did this, all that. Man, even 60 years later, it's got to be a lot of these folks are dead now. Now what are we covering up now? Come on. Let's see. When he says he got on the phone and McLeod in the booth next to mine, they talk about the technology that they had at the time. They probably are light years ahead now that if you're in one phone booth, you could be in the phone booth next to them and they'd have a device. You could just put it on the window and you could hear their whole phone conversation. That's like Neanderthal technology. Let's see. They're not going to F around. I talk about that on Neutralizing Workplace Racism all the time, that you should know. That's why I say read your policy and procedure A to Z, beginning to end, even really before you agree to take the job, ideally. But you should read the whole thing way early in that process. Highlighted everything. You should know that. Do you work on a job where you might be required to take a polygraph test? You need to know that in advance. That is not something we do. What? I can be what? What? Wait a minute. What page? 45 seconds. You want to know that before you take the job. And then you can already plan out, and that won't be a big surprise. You can already think about your, plan when it gets to that point. But wow, that is not nothing that you want sprung on you, that they're taping the nodes to you. And it's like, what? I got to. And we talk neutralizing workplace racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. I think all this we've talked about. Searches, lie detector test, being falsely accused, all the keeping your composure, all this, racist jokes, metaphor, all of this. Nothing new here. We talked about all of this every week. Neutralizing workplace racism, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. No searches, even if you get accused of stealing the weed whacker. No, sir. No, ma'am. You are not searching my vehicle property for your weed whacker go missing every day. No. That's it. We'll be here tomorrow. Compensatory call in. 2 times for what we have been reading. Sobriety would be best. Can't even do my job properly because I'm mad dogged up. Creator. Help us maximize our time and energy to replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Help me stop wasting non-white people's time and energy, including my own. Minimize contact, minimize conflict. Stop name-calling black people. Heard enough of that from white people in the book this week. Stop being discourteous to black people. Ditto. Stop gossiping. Stop producing throwaway offspring. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cows signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my condition. Even my conditioning has been conditioned.